Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Mary Stewart, and I am calling the regular meeting of the City Council to order. As a reminder for those who are watching remotely, council meetings are now in hybrid format, which means the community can participate both in person and virtually via the Zoom platform. If you are raising your hand, please press *9 to raise your hand, or you can just press the little symbol to raise your hand for public comment when it is time for the appropriate item. Vice Mayor Pease, will you please lead the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please rise as able. Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And before we get started, just wanted to say Happy New Year. Thank you all for being here. I know this is an exciting meeting. We have some interesting things on the agenda, and I'll go ahead and pass it over to City Manager Derek Johnson to present the City Manager report. No proclamations today.
Great, thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Welcome to 2024. Glad to be here. We've got a nice agenda for you tonight. So I'm going to start off with just opportunities for our various different advisory body recruitments. And just for those that are listening, if you're really interested in getting involved in city business, there is a plethora of opportunities to serve on a variety of different advisory bodies that advise the city council or staff and are involved in kind of key aspects of shaping the city. And so you can apply to serve on an advisory body to the city council in a variety of policies and programs and a variety of issues ranging from housing, development, public transportation, architecture, community events, and more. And so the deadline to apply is January 21st, 2024. And you can see up on the screen here, we have a table of opportunities in terms of the variety of different advisory body openings. With that theme, continuing that theme in terms of developing opportunities for developing what I call civic literacy, and particularly some civic understanding here in San Luis Obispo, is the 2024 Community Academy will be will be opening up, and this spring with applications. We'll be accepting applications beginning on January 29th at 5:30 p.m. So I will be reminding the council and the community at the next meeting of the application period. And so the Community Academy, if you're not familiar with it, it is a free 6-session interactive program that provides really an opportunity to do a deep dive into the community, increase their knowledge of city government and its impact. Participants will meet with city council members, department heads, and staff. There'll be interactive presentations, and participants will learn how decisions are made, how funds are allocated, how projects are done, how departments operate. Participants will be enrolled on a first-come, first-served basis, and so we look forward to having some really engaged community members participate in the program. And if you're interested, we got some testimonials from previous Academy members, and they just were really thrilled with the opportunity. We have some of them have transitioned to serving on advisory bodies and helping shape the city of San Luis Obispo. Speaking about shaping the city, we just want to share with the community the installation of the historic Chong's Candy sign. So you may know that back in the early 2000s, the sign was donated to the city of San Luis Obispo with the request that it be displayed in a public location. It essentially sat in storage for about 20 years. And so we took the opportunity to hire someone who was experienced in restoring the original neon sign with the particular colors and fonts and other details that are representative of the historic Chinese community. And is for people who are not familiar with Chong's Candy, it was just located down the street. And so along with this installation, we'll be adding a Chinatown historical historic district logo and additional neon and paint. We've reviewed the conceptual design with the Cultural Heritage Commission and done significant amount of outreach to the Chinese community here in San Luis Obispo. Painting is scheduled to begin tentatively next week, and it's weather dependent. The majority of the project we're trying to wrap up in time for the Lunar New Year on February 10th. So this is a big celebration this year for the city that we're co-sponsoring with a variety of our partners throughout the city. And so we just wanted to share this information with the council and the community. Also want to share with the council that our Park and Recreation Department is being recognized, and they were recently presented 3 California Parks and Recreation Society awards for their outstanding support with the community. The city's senior programs, our Monday meetup community events, our volunteers with the Jack House docents were all recognized as being community champions. And I just want to thank our dedicated staff and volunteers to improve the quality of life as part of our parks and recreation programs. And it's great to be recognized by some of our professional associations. More on parks and recreation programs. So we're starting off the new year with the next slide. With an overview of some of our youth activities, such as Arts and Crafts Club for kids 4 to 6 and 6 to 12 years old at the Meadow Park Center, or we can get you moving with youth pickleball, which we have some clinics for ages 6 to 12 on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the afternoons from 3:45 to 4:45 p.m. You can register for these events at French Park by visiting slowparksandrec.org or by calling 781-7300. Next, I would just want to give an update about some of our economic development partnerships and some of our activities over the holiday season. So we're coming off the success of the Buy Local Bonus Program. We have rolled out the Eat Local Bonus Program, which began on January 2nd. And as a reminder, this rewards diners who spend more than $100 at local eateries with a $25 gift card to eat at another local eatery. So our Eat Local Bonus Program runs through January 31st, and it's available while supplies last. We have doubled our investment by purchasing gift cards for the program, with $50,000 going directly to restaurant owners. So new to this year, it's the first ever Slow Restaurant Week from January 12th to the 21st. We've asked eateries to create their perfect pairing, a select duo of 2 menu items only available for Slow Restaurants Week. And we'll be promoting these special offerings in hope to encourage folks to head somewhere new or to frequent their favorite place. So anyone who heads to a participating eatery from January 12th to the 21st, whether or not they get the perfect pairing, you can be eligible to win an incredible prize of a gift card for participating valued at $1,000. And so more as a reminder for this, the community can learn by visiting eatlocalbonusslow.com or slowrestaurantweek.com and learn about these exciting programs. So with that, I do want to cover kind of a recap of the numbers from our Buy Local Bonus Program. And so we did sell out again this year with more financial investment from the city than ever before. And thank you to the council for that investment. And as a reminder, this program's very similar to the one I just mentioned. It rewards shoppers for buying local and by spending $100 on gifts at local shops. Shoppers can then take their receipts to the Slow Chamber Visitor Center and get the $25 gift card. Just by way of numbers, from November 24th until December 23rd, we had 5,000 qualified shoppers and reviewed nearly 8,000 receipts, which totaled spending reached over $800,000. With the initial investment of $125,000 in purchase gift cards, it's a small investment totaling nearly $1 million, or about $943,000 in direct local spending. And we see this as a fairly big, return on investment for the city in terms of economic activity. And I hope everyone had a chance to go downtown during the holiday season. I know I did with my family, and it was quite a lot of foot and vehicle and other traffic to make a really festive environment for the holiday season. Now shifting to some of the work that we're doing in our community, I want to give the council an update on some of our very visible projects. The North Truro Greenway project continues with, though we've had some recent weather-related delays. In the next few weeks, construction will continue on the ongoing work on the installation of some retaining walls on the west side of Broad Street near Mission. The contractor is also continuing the bike path behind the Ramona Shopping Center with ongoing installation of irrigation and landscaping. Some major items that remain include the roadway slurry sealing, and that's obviously very weather dependent. Street striping and signage, and completion of improvements on the Truro underpass, including the installation of lighting and art fence, as well as a protected bike medians on the roadway. We're still on schedule to complete the project by spring of 2024, that includes the underpass art fencing. Then shifting to our pavement maintenance and mobility improvements, they're continuing as part of our arterials paving project. And the contractor is currently working on culvert and sidewalk repairs on Monterey Street. And the public can expect to see some work during the day hours on Mill Street, and striping to work to begin on, on Mill Street and on Monterey. And just a reminder, we're asking for commuters to expect some travel delays and some lane shifts throughout the work zones, and some project maps and details of our work limits are available at our Slow in Motion website. And again, if you're interested in getting an update on our projects, you can email us at slowinmotion@slowcity.org, or by reaching out to city staff at 805-783-7887. And the website on that is slowcity.org/slowinmotion. Next, shifting to an update on some key aspects of both our climate action plan and our active transportation plan. We've got our 2023 report card. With the close of 2023, staff is putting the final touches on the report card for the active transportation plan, which will complete and share the news at the end of January. But I wanted to share some highlights of the report card that show some significant progress in implementing some active transportation projects. So we've completed 26% of the Tier 1 network, with full completion expected by 2030. Pregnant pause for that to sink in, because I know that's important for the community. And then we've seen some increases in mode share, with 16% by bike and 11% by walking. And again, the ATP goal is 20% for bikes and 18% by walking by 2030. So I am super proud of our team that is working on projects that are the highest priority as established by the City Council, and it's showing up in the numbers. And I'm really excited about the projects we'll be working here soon. And that brings us to a good segue of talking about an opportunity on Thursday night, for our upcoming community workshop on our 2024 road sealing project. And so this is from 6 to 8 p.m. at the SLO Library Community Room across the street, and participants will learn about the project and have the opportunity to provide input on improvements in all modes of travel, as well as traffic calming and safety enhancements. This year's paving area covers the streets in bold shown in the shaded areas on the map, and more info can be found at the city's Slow in Motion webpage. I just want to note for the community in particular, we're in partnership and conversation with Cal Poly for some potential changes to Grand Avenue to do some traffic along that corridor. We just received, literally hot off the press, some designs just this afternoon. And so if you're interested in those plans, I encourage people to show up at the workshop to learn more about the road diet that we have planned for that particular segment, subject to a lot of conversation with our Cal Poly partners. And with that, Madam Mayor, that concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions as usual.
Thank you. Are you saying at the January 11th community workshop, Grand Avenue will be discussed as well?
Correct.
Great, thank you. And then the statistics on the Buy Local program were awesome. Is there a comparison of 22 to 23?
Those were on par or better than the previous year. So I think we see continued success with that program, and we are roughly on par with the Eat Local bonus program for January as well.
Great, thank you so much. Any questions from my colleagues? Okay, Councilmember Marks. There we go.
Thank you.
Oops, can you press again, sorry.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, just a clarification on the community academy and the applications. When do they go out? When are they due? And where can people get the applications?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Marks. So the application will be posted online at the city's website. I'll follow up the next meeting. This was just a really early preview for the council and the community. So if you're thinking about it, we'll provide more information, those details that you just requested, Councilmember Marks, about those. And then always, if you're interested, you can call the city clerk's office. We can put individuals in touch, but we'll have more details at the next meeting.
Thank you. Well, thank you for a really great report. Wonderful always to see what's happening in our community, and so many activities always. Well, next is our public comment period for items not on the agenda. So if you have a comment for something on the agenda, this is not your turn. But if you have something and you are on Zoom, this is that great time to go ahead and raise your hand. And I'm just gonna, it's the beginning of the year, we'll read instructions about public comment, and then we'll kick it off. So remembering we are here to listen first, respect different opinions, show courtesy, criticize constructively, and debate the policy, not the person. If you support what someone is saying, go ahead and give us a yes, you support it. If you don't, you can go ahead and give us a no, you don't support it, but we are not clapping and booing. It's just we want to keep the meeting moving along and respecting people and what they have to say. So I wanted to go ahead and get that out. And City Clerk, do we have any public comment?
Yes, we have 6 in chambers. The first one is Louise Justice, then Kenneth Pellegrino, and then Edward, Casaselli.
Hold on one second. We're going to get your speaker or your microphone working.
Ready now?
Okay, ready now. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Louise Justice, and I reside in San Luis Obispo on Augusta near Laurel Lane. The absence of a crossing guard for the students who attend Sinsheimer School is a concern. I've witnessed children racing across the intersection in an attempt to avoid being struck by oncoming traffic. Even though there are stop signs and those yellow pedestrian signs, I've seen cars heed neither one of them. Would it be possible to install the flashing lights like the ones we have in downtown, as well as those that were recently installed at Broad and Islay? A solution to this should be now, not later, when an accident occurs. My second item is my concern with regard to public transportation, now operated by Transdev of America for the city of San Luis Obispo. In October, I submitted an email to Messrs. Odell and Stanley. I did not get a reply that was satisfactory. I was told to contact 2 individuals, one of whom was Mr. Stanley. I have not received a response to my questions. The problems exist, there are no answers, and since I receive slow in motion project updates, why wouldn't it be possible for the Transportation Department to do the same thing? Transparency is necessary to keep the ridership informed as to changes in routes and time schedules. And by the way, there are no printed schedules in the buses. Our notices are over a year old, sometimes dating back to COVID. Where are the electric buses that were introduced in summer? And why are we still using buses that are 14 and 16 years old and filthy? If we need more drivers, perhaps we should extend our search area. Many questions, no answers. Perhaps you yourselves are unaware or not experiencing these issues with public transit. However, if no one speaks up, these issues cannot be addressed. Therefore, I'm informing you of these issues and hope that you are hearing, listening, and will act on them. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much.
Kenneth Pellegrino, Edward Casaselli, and then Jean Nelson.
Good evening, I'm Kenneth Pellegrino. I'm a retired physician living in San Luis Ranch, and I'm here tonight in follow-up of my letter of 12/3 that I wrote to all of you. Very shortly, the city manager and the Public Works Department will receive a hazard report from Althouse and Mead, consulting biologists and botanists. This is going to be authored primarily by David Magny, who's a biologist and botanist. I talked to him as he was doing his consultation on the trees and his work. They've been working for about 2 weeks. I want to caution you all that this science is not an exact science. I'm going to quote him in saying that no biologist or botanist can predict which tree will fall and when it will fall. It's very inexact, and that's David's words. In fact, the tree that fell August 10th on Lot 3 at St. Louis Ranch, he said 1 year prior was a safe, quote, and the tree was healthy, end of quote. He told me that last week. They are doing root assessment, which is great. They're going down about 1 to 2 feet. Eucalyptus roots go down about 25 feet. And he said that it's a limited assessment. So they're looking for data points and they're looking to make inferences from data points, but it is not exact. Bear in mind, regulation 122490 in the regs for tree removal requests states, quote, imminent hazard to life and property. This is very open to subjective evaluation and consideration. We believe the Homeowners Association, the 25 to 30 residents who live on forestry, that any tree that is towering over private property with terminal crowns that are arced over houses and yards that have dying crowns should be removed preventively and proactively. David himself said he would not sleep under tree 178, which is right behind our house, yet every night my wife and I do. My neighbor to the left, Travis, who's a physician, does, and Ed and his family, he's coming up next, does. David also said winds and water will change the risk assessment. Right now, the conditions are great. The ground is fairly dry, but when it's windy or if we get a microburst, anything can happen there. All bets are off. I believe the city of SLO would never accept the conditions of Lot 3 and the risk that Lot 3 presents to the public domain and to homeowners because of the condition that's there. Take a look at Sinsheimer Park and the magnificent job that the town has done on the north side of the tennis courts, maintaining 50 eucalyptus trees in 2 rows. There's no overhangs, there's no side branches. Can I say one quick thing?
Thank you, time's up, sorry.
Okay, collectively,
Next
trees
speaker.
are important, but individually,
Okay, the
they're
next
not.
speaker, thank you so
Humans are.
much.
Edward, and then Jean Nelson, and then Leo Corley.
Good evening, esteemed mayor and members of the city council. My name is Ed Casaselli, a resident of San Luis Ranch. I felt compelled to appear before you today out of fear for the physical and emotional safety of my wife and children, as well as my fellow residents and that of the public that transverses through our housing development. Standing only 40 feet from my back door is a towering 130-foot blue gum eucalyptus that is leaning over my house. Half the branches on the canopy of this tree are dead. I am not the only resident in this situation, as there are dozens of other homes in a similar predicament. Please put yourself in my position and ask, what would you do if you were me? 20 years ago, I worked at Vandenberg Air Force Base in the 30th Space Wing Safety Office to identify, assess, and mitigate risk for rocket launches and other support operations. A simple tool we used to assess risk was called a risk matrix, where the risk of an accident or failure is categorized by both its probability to occur and, if it did occur, what would be the severity of the injury and/or damage. For instance, if an accident was very likely to occur, but let's say at worst there could just be some minor damage to some equipment where the paint gets scuffed, we would easily say that the risk is low enough not to warrant action, even though that event may happen multiple times per day. On the other hand, if there was a low but realistic probability that within the next year or 2 or 3, that a 130-foot tall leaning tree may fall onto a 25-foot tall house, and we know that the severity of damage or injury can easily include the loss of someone's home or the loss of human life, including that of children in these homes, would any reasonable person think that this is an acceptable risk? Even arborist reports claiming that a tree is healthy still ends with that very tree toppling over not even a year later. Further, the reason Vandenberg was built where it is was because it is on a peninsula with a clear and open path to the Pacific Ocean to the south. The reason that this was necessary is because Vandenberg put satellites into a polar orbit. That requires a southerly launch over an unpopulated area so that if a rocket were to fail, it would fall into the ocean and no human life or property would be endangered. The residents living too close under these towering behemoth eucalyptus trees is the equivalent of Vandenberg launching rockets over populated areas. Eventually, a rocket will fail and fall on someone's house. It is a simple case of mathematical probability. Requiring an annual arborist report inspection of our trees may reduce the mathematical probability of a catastrophic event, but it does not eliminate it. The risk level will still be unacceptable for our situation. The residents of San Luis Ranch don't want to have a treeless landscape. We appreciate the beauty of trees and the benefit to our environment. We simply ask that these dangerous eucalyptus that pose a risk to our homes be removed and a more appropriate and native species be put in its place. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you so much.
Jean Nelson, Leo Corley, and then Jeffrey Land, and then we will go to our online speakers.
Good evening, City Council members. My name is Dr. Gene Nelson, live in Chumash Village in San Luis Obispo. This is an extension of my previous comments on December the 5th and the December the 19th, criticizing the Higuera Street Complete project. Bullet point 1. Any projected decrease in rush hour traffic queue lengths at the Madonna, Higuera, South Street intersection would be the result of motorists detouring to alternate routes, which are already congested with rush hour traffic. Many of us relocated to San Luis Obispo to escape rush hour congestion in either Southern California or the San Francisco Bay Area. It would be a misuse of about $9 million in taxpayer funds to increase rather than decrease congestion on important slow circulation elements. Bullet point 2 for tonight. Mathematicians and engineers use a technique of approaching limits to understand dynamic systems. Let's set vehicle miles traveled to 0. Here are some real-world consequences. Local commerce would grind to a halt. There would be a minuscule diminution in regional demand for gasoline, yielding a barely detectable decrease in gas prices in Southern California. The change in regional emissions would not be detectable as motorists drive a bit more elsewhere. The idea of decreasing slow vehicle miles traveled having any benefit is based only on wishful thinking. The $9 million should be repurposed to widen rather than congest South Higuera. It needs to be widened to 5 lanes instead of creating more rush hour congestion. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much.
Leo Corley, Jeffrey Land.
Evening. Um, From the unceded territories of the Northern Chumash and Salinas people, I address you all tonight in hopes that I can compel your hearts that the city of San Luis Obispo adopt a permanent ceasefire resolution and bring an end to the suffering of the Palestinian people and specifically to the people in Gaza. In the past 24 hours, 250 people have lost their lives, have had their lives taken from them. In the past 90 days, over 23,000 Palestinians have lost their lives, with over 11,000 of them being children. I'm trying to wrap my mind around this. That's an average of 256 people killed a day, every day, for 90 days in a row. That would have been the entire population of my hometown, Paso Robles, and Templeton, when I was a child growing up there. In the 90s, imagine completely decimated, annihilated. Even the Pope has called what is happening in Gaza to the people in Gaza terrorism. I'll pause for a breath because I wonder if I or we cannot even appeal to your humanity, what is there that's left? What more do any of us need to see or hear? This is our money paying for this devastation of a people and the indiscriminate destruction and death of mothers, children, and families. Who have we become? What unhuman thing are any of us to still be making excuses or justifications for this? Please, I implore you all to call for a ceasefire resolution now by adopting a ceasefire resolution for our county. We cannot wait. All of the infrastructure and homes have been destroyed and nearly 2 million people have been displaced. And now the people of Gaza are facing starvation, disease, and death from exposure. If the killing doesn't stop and no aid is let in, it is critical that we act now while most of the people in Gaza are still alive. We have to act now. We need a ceasefire resolution now. Let us look back on this and know that our true values, that our deepest and most authentic humanity led us to make an incredible intervention on behalf of our beautiful relatives in Palestine. Let this be the story that we tell and not the one that could be if we continue to sit here and do nothing. Let the only thing that be killed from this moment forward is our complicity and our indifference. I implore you all to adopt a ceasefire resolution now and may Palestine be free. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, you will be next, but I just want to say that I did miss a few of them, so we have several more in-chamber speakers before we go to online.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Jeffrey Land. I have been a resident of San Luis Obispo on Broad Street, right by the wall that was featured in the slide by city manager for almost 30 years. And I want to thank you all for your service to the community. As a recently retired public school teacher, I taught civics and history at the high school level. I recognize the important work you're doing, and I want to thank you for that. And also recognize the important role that San Luis Obispo has played in taking leadership in moments of crisis. And we've seen that particularly with racial justice issues, but it goes back to the right of people to breathe freely. So I recognize that there is a precedent here of the city showing courageous leadership. And I would say at this moment, as a history teacher who has attempted to have these conversations about peace and conflict in the Middle East, particularly in Palestine and Israel, I recognize the complexity and the pain. And yet I also want to acknowledge the connection that we have, not financially, historically, culturally, emotionally, family, to that region. And I would implore you tonight to I guess, recognize, in the words of Dr. King, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And this moment is a pivotal moment in history, and I would love to see San Luis Obispo engage in the conversation about a possible ceasefire resolution, craft language that reflects our values, but also recognize that many cities and counties and regions around the country are recognizing that we can't just let this moment pass without engaging and showing some leadership. So I implore you to support. I'm part of a group here tonight to urge you to begin having that conversation and recognizing that this is an important issue to our community. We've seen local rallies, we've seen gatherings at Mitchell Park as recently as Sunday, trying to recognize the suffering and pain and find some way forward. So please help us find a way forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Alicia Daventer, then Marcia Myers, then Mai Gifford.
Hello, my name is Alyssa Devantier. I'm a registered nurse and I work here in the city of SLO and in surrounding cities. And I'm here today in solidarity with my colleagues in Palestine. Over the past 11 years, I've worked as a nurse in schools, hospitals, homes, and public health. I've held space through birth and death and have supported people's health along their beautiful lifespan. I love being a healthcare worker because I believe and feel that I'm doing sacred work. I think many healthcare workers feel this way and have a shared understanding of this, which is why it has been horrifying on every level to witness Israel's targeting of the healthcare infrastructure across Gaza. As of last week, Israel's military has killed 374 healthcare workers, and only 13 out of 36 hospitals in Gaza are even partially functional. They struggle with shortages of nearly every supply. Healthcare workers and patients continue to be targeted by drones, snipers, tanks, and missiles. This is especially concerning given the volume of injured Palestinians in Gaza. Just today, Rick Pieperkorn, a representative with the World Health Organization, noted the 59,100 wounded civilians who will require long-term care. Spinal trauma, crush injuries, severe burns, amputees. I've never seen so many amputees in my life, including among children, he said. I work with patients with similar injuries. If any of us here had an injury like this, we would anticipate a team of specialists, multiple surgeries, wound care specialists, physical therapy, occupational therapy, medications to prevent pain and infection, and optimal nutrition. In Gaza, they are lucky to find a hospital with space for them. It feels like a nightmare. I care for our beautiful community here, and the taxes I pay are then used to fund atrocities on precious lives across the world. I'm aware a ceasefire resolution has been presented to the SLO City Council by local community members, and I'm asking you to join cities across the US, including Long Beach, Oakland, and San Francisco, in calling for a ceasefire to prevent the loss of any more precious lives in the Middle East. Thank you.
Thank you.
Marcia, Mai, and then Seamus.
Good evening. My name is Marcia Myers, and I'm a resident and food service worker in San Luis Obispo. I'm here to call for a resolution for ceasefire in occupied Palestine now. Over 23,000 Palestinians have been killed by Israel's bombing and ground campaign since October 9th. At least 9,700 children have been murdered. However, the majority of deaths include Palestinian fathers, brothers, uncles, sons, and grandfathers. Over 102 million people in Gaza have been displaced by Israel in just the 6 weeks following, and the numbers continue to rise. Over 42% of households in Gaza have been destroyed. In just the last 24 hours, 510 Gazans have been wounded and 249 have been killed. though that number can never be accurate, as family members are unable to find their loved ones under massive buildings reduced to rubble. The number of bombs dropped by Israel can never be accurate because they continue these attacks as we speak. Israel itself has reported that every hour in Gaza, 15 people are killed, 35 people are injured, 42 bombs are dropped, and 12 buildings are destroyed. Every hour. Israel has been committing an intentional genocide, displacement, dispossession, and ethnic cleansing since the Nakba of 1948, the catastrophe where over 750,000 indigenous Palestinians were displaced from their land and forced to find refuge in neighboring countries. Since then, Israel has been bolstered, aided, and encouraged by the US and our hundreds of billions of dollars in taxes to continue the massacre in light of our economic interests in West Asia. Israel has targeted bombings in hospitals, schools, and refugee camps. Israel has cut off all access to water, food, medicine, medical supplies, internet, and telecommunications. Many of the victims of Israel's bombing campaign include doctors, medical workers, journalists, aid workers, and foreign staff of aid organizations. Recent polling suggests that 66% of all Americans, over 80% of Democrats, and a majority of Republicans support a ceasefire in Gaza. As of December 2023, South Africa has charged Israel with war crimes and genocide against the people of Palestine. The case will be heard by the International Criminal Court. As of now, San Luis Obispo is not only complacent, but actively giving nearly $700,000 of taxpayers' money to arming the Israeli offensive force with weapons, defense innovation, and surveillance tools. We must join the cities of San Francisco, Oakland, and Long Beach and put forth a resolution for ceasefire. This is a war aimed to economically uphold white supremacist hegemony through annihilation and dehumanization of a whole culture and peoples. We have the power to call for a ceasefire now.
Thank you.
Mai Simas, and then Jacob Dewhurst.
Hello, good evening. Mayor and council members, my name is Mai Gifford and I reside in Paso Robles. I work in the public school system and I work in the food service department in high schools. I want to talk about calling for a ceasefire. I would love for you to consider calling for a ceasefire resolution, and I'm coming from a place of speaking from the heart. We all have access to the statistics, and I'm speaking from the heart of an American-born child of a war refugee. My mother emigrated here from Vietnam, and I can speak to the long-lasting trauma throughout the Vietnamese diaspora all around the world that's long-lasting and impacts generations. The erasure of culture, the bombing of institutions that are historical, and what's happening to Gazans and Palestinians right now. War and displacement, war crimes. The war crimes that I'm watching happen, such as dropping white phosphorus, is reminiscent of Agent Orange and napalm being dropped in Vietnam on civilians. We all remember the iconic Time magazine cover of Kim Phúc Phang Thị, and that shook Americans to their core. Folks that were already calling for the war to end, and it helped radicalize folks that were on the cusp. And I want to just remind us that in this day and age, we have access. We have global access to each other. We have young journalists in Palestine right now, ages 18 to 27, risking their lives to show us live footage. We don't have to imagine what's going on. We don't have to wait for a powerful Time magazine cover by a photographer. We can see it happening and unfold. And I ask for your empathy and compassionate lens when we're thinking about this. People say it's complicated, but all I see is unnecessary pain and suffering that we have the power to stop. And I want to just say that I think everything that's going on is inhumane. We're starving. They're being starved. They're dying of disease. It's not just the bombs, and it's not just a ceasefire. The fact that they're ruining infrastructure, medical infrastructure, as my comrade has mentioned, is just, I can't stand by and watch the inhumanity unfold, and I just implore everyone to tap into their human empathy, think about Palestinians as our, siblings. And please, please, I urge you to use your voice and your power to call for a ceasefire resolution so that San Luis Obispo County can join San Francisco, Oakland, and Long Beach and be on the right side of history. Thank you.
Thank you.
Seamus, and then Jacob Dewhurst, and then Jackie Lowe.
Hello, good evening. My name is Seamus Land. I grew up in San Luis Obispo. I'm living currently in Missoula, Montana, and I wanted to share some perspective, add to the voices that have spoken in calling for a ceasefire resolution from the perspective of someone who sees different localities around the United States increasingly recognizing this issue. If all politics are local, these localities together can add together their voices and create important change. I've seen San Luis Obispo increasingly grapple with the profound injustices of our history on stolen land, and we're seeing much of the same playbook play out in the Middle East, whether it's the destruction of livelihoods, the destruction of the dehumanization of people, the destruction of infrastructure, and the rhetoric that we see all around us. We have an ability to change that by calling for making our values clear through a ceasefire resolution. We are already materially connected to the actions overseas. Our financial support through taxes, through retirement funds, the way that we finance as individuals, finance the arms companies that are providing the weapons and ammunitions overseas, it makes us complicit, and we need to recognize that and find that moral clarity to recognize the way we can voice our values and oppose those actions. So recognizing the ways where we're materially complicit, and a ceasefire resolution is an opportunity to become morally complicit in turning this issue around. And I think I just wanted to recognize that it may seem like a strange thing to be calling for a ceasefire resolution alongside bike infrastructure and small issues locally in our community. But I just want to affirm that from the perspective of seeing another city in another region go through the same issue, it's just as clear to me that these small actions, these moral values-based actions are very important and can make a very big difference. And we're already seeing that tide turn around the country. So again, San Luis Obispo may not be the first, but we can be on the right side of things as Denver, as San Francisco, Long Beach, Oakland, other places are already drafting these resolutions and moving to approve them. So I'll leave it there, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Jacob, Jackie Lowe, and then that's our final speaker in chambers.
Hi, my name is Jacob. I live in San Luis Obispo, and I went to high school in Paso. I've lived in San Luis Obispo all my life, and I have two topics to talk about today. In case I run out of time at the end, I'd like to follow what all of my people behind me said, or people who came before me, and agree that the city should do more. If we don't, who will? So please understand the civilians that are dying and being blown up in no fault of their own, and I encourage you to just think about how you're a civilian and imagine if you were just sitting there doing your job and for no fault of your own, you got blown up because you happen to be born in Gaza. Aside from that, I'd like to talk about city parking facility USE-0559-2023, which is located at 1166 Higuera Street. In the City Planning Commission meeting from last month, December 13th, 2023, they talked about this parking facility and how the city had recently acquired this land and wants to turn it from a vacant lot into...
I'm going to stop you right there. Sorry, but 1166 Higuera is actually 5J on our consent item. So if you want to hold that to the consent item public comment, that would be great.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you so much.
Jackie Lowe, and then online we have Kay after that.
May I begin? Okay. Good evening. My name is Jackie Lowe. I am a resident of San Luis Obispo. I'm the prevention coordinator for a Title I elementary school in Atascadero. I'm a doctoral candidate in educational leadership at USC, and I am a certified educational researcher. I'm here tonight to share that I and all other community members have been excluded from participating in the equity leadership team at San Luis Coastal Unified School District. I began attending school board meetings this fall in order to give public comment and to better understand how to be involved as a community stakeholder. It is my observation that the Board of Trustees are not grasping the need for current staff and leaders to grow and evolve as our community does. On Tuesday, December 19th, I formally submitted a written request to Superintendent Dr. Prater for the Board of Trustees to consider establishing a DEI task force that is modeled after the city's task force from 2020. I received a response from Dr. Prater on January 3rd, noting that my request is redundant. He boasted of awards that the district received for the model they implemented. Dr. Prater drew comparisons between the DEI work of the city and what the school district is doing. Unfortunately, this is a false comparison, as your work has resulted in measurable outcomes such as 90 recommendations, a commitment to ongoing funding, an Office of DEI, and your work took place during public meetings. I am here because the district and their leaders are satisfied with recycling the same 3 recommendations since 2018 without measurable outcomes or actions. I want to clarify that I fully understand your jurisdictional authority. However, each of you have endorsed school board trustees, and I'm here this evening to publicly request the continual support of these officials by advocating for advancing DEI work at SLO Coastal Unified that allows for the public to participate, collaborate, and support educational programs in our community. It is my desire to build the capacity of the board and staff through the public process. I've seen major cultural concerns that need to be addressed, cultural concerns that are real barriers to educational equity and safety for our community. Please join me at San Luis Coastal Board of Trustees meetings to speak about the importance of conducting DEI work in a way that is consistent with DEI principles. Each of you have a moral responsibility as our local cultural and community leaders. Your influence must extend past endorsing school board members in their re-election campaigns. I have watched how the City Council engages with the public, the questions you ask of staff, and the fidelity with which you wish to conduct your role for this community. I believe the district's Board of Trustees could and should benefit from the foundational work you have done. You all have my contact info. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, our final speaker is Kay, who is online. You can now unmute yourself.
Is it working?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, hi, my name is Naomi, and I have lived in San Luis Obispo since 2011. I am on a roll at Cuesta for computer science. I have an elementary student, my son, who is also on a roll, and we both would like to call for a ceasefire. I cannot believe that my tax dollars are being used for that. As a mother who doesn't have to dig her child out of something, I would like to agree with the group that we should not be doing that, and San Luis Obispo should join the list. And that's all I really wanted to say tonight.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you for all of the public comment on items not on the agenda. I know that we have talked about the flashing lights, as mentioned earlier, as far as our traffic plans and how our transportation plan. And if you don't mind pointing people, city manager, to, sorry, there's just so many thoughts from today's public comment. The beacons, that would be great. Also, I know we've talked about the ridership challenges with drivers, and so if you don't mind just re-sharing again about the transportation, that would be great. And I also know that we shared about the trees in the past over at San Luis Ranch, so if you have any updates, that would be wonderful to hear of those 3 items so far.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Happy to share some updates. So first, just to invite Director Tway to come up, and maybe we can start in that order with an update on the report, and we can give you an update and share with the community kind of the next steps.
Yes, good evening. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. So regarding the trees in San Luis Ranch, I have been in contact with representative from San Luis Ranch asking about the status of the report that we require in order to further determine what to do with the trees and what to allow for the applicant to do with the trees. And he said it is coming. I heard from the public that they are aware that it's in process and should be done soon. So as soon as we receive that, we can continue forward with the applicant's request to remove some of the trees, and we will have proactive meetings with representatives from San Luis Ranch to talk about the trees. And I think I mentioned last time, one thing that we have to take into consideration is that those trees are part of mitigation measures for the project, and there are sensitive habitats in those trees. So we'll work with the applicant to ensure that we're both addressing the trees as well as the other ancillary issues related to the trees and the required replacement should they be removed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just invite Director Horn to come up and talk a little bit about just the feedback we got about both transit, and then also we can talk about how to engage with some of our transportation staff about the request for some improvements along some of our routes to school.
And the schedule as well.
I think transit, I think Director Horn hopefully will cover the range of issues related to transit that the speaker mentioned.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, absolutely. So just starting with Augusta and Laurel Lane, just did a quick look at what's going on there. Four-way stop controlled intersection with high-vis crossings. We can definitely evaluate the area and ensure that, that's the most appropriate implementation out there. As far as crossing guards, we completely support the idea of the school district providing crossing guards out there, and be happy to help along the way. As far as our transit system, as far as our transit vehicles, we have 2 electric buses that are currently in use right now. We have 6 more along the way. This will replace an aging fleet. We did purchase mini buses at one point in time in 2008 with the amount of federal money that came in during that time. So the great thing about replacing a lot of assets at once is you have a great and new fleet. The problem with replacing a lot of assets at once is you have to replace a lot of assets in the future at once. And so that's what we're going through right now. So we have 2 electric buses that are here, 6 more along the way, and we will be replacing our bus assets over the next few financial plans to ensure that we're meeting the state requirements and the city's local climate action plans. So some of our buses are a little bit older. Additionally, we've had seven buses that were down over the month of December that required higher usage of our existing fleet to cover the routes. As a driver update, council did authorize the city manager to approve an agreement with our drivers. Just backing up a little bit, the city operates slow transit. TransDev, formerly First Transit, is the private company who does that work for us. They operate and maintain the bus system. So we have authorization to kind of go and talk to the union about increasing wages and retention benefits for those drivers. The union's currently evaluating that, and we anticipate that we'll have agreement for the city manager to consider in spring, summer 2024. So it's underway, but the meet and confer process is gonna take what it needs to take, and sure everyone's heard. So TransDev, let's see, buses, drivers. So that does, we currently need, let me see here for my notes, we currently need 32 drivers and 5 part-time drivers to be able to operate slow transit, the full academic route. So when Cal Poly's in session, when we're doing all the routes. And we currently have 23 drivers and 5 part-time. And it's been a battle for us for the last 2 to 3 years, is trying to keep that number and actually increase that number moving forward. So we're hopeful that we're able to come to resolution with TransDev Union and increase those wages. That will ultimately help increase the number of drivers that we have. And then just finally, regarding slow transit, I know there's lots of different questions and ideas on things we can do. We are coming forward on next council meeting on January 23rd to talk about the Transit Innovation Plan. And so if people have ideas or they like to have some areas explored for slow transit, that would be an ideal time to bring those items forward.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I know that we have the 2 electric buses you mentioned. Do you happen to know what routes they are or where people can go to see where those electric buses are on their traveling?
Yeah, I apologize. I don't know the routes. I believe it was 3A and 3B, but I don't know the routes off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
No worries. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. City Manager?
Yeah, thank you. We'll follow up with that information. I think it fluctuates in talking to some of the drivers who've been very enthusiastic about the electric buses. We'll provide details about what are the routes that they're generally on. I know we've had to do some shifting when we had some buses out, and then we'll also follow up with council to make sure that there's updated schedules both at the bus stops and on all the buses as well.
Thank you. That would be great. I know that not everyone uses the app, and I will say that, sorry, Mr. Horn, can you just remind us how long it takes to go through the training? I know personally someone who is going through training to be a driver right now, and it takes a little longer than, you know, having someone pop into the bus and just start driving it. So if you don't have it, that's okay. But I just know that that's part of the process is, of course, the hiring, but of course, the training as well.
Sure, yeah, and I don't have that actually. I'm sorry about that. Okay. I do remember it takes months to go through the training. It's not a quick and easy process, and there's also driver attrition too. So everyone who starts the training doesn't finish the training,
of course.
And everyone who finishes the training doesn't come work for slow transit. So there's that.
That's
too.
Also true. Yes,
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I see I have at least two people that would like to speak up here on the council. And I just want to thank everyone who came to share about asking us to do a ceasefire. That is the fact of imagining how many people are dying on a daily basis is horrific, and I 100% agree with that. I will pass it on to Councilmember Francis.
I had a follow-up for Mr. Horn. Thank you for all those updates, Mr. Horn. I had a question on the last report we saw. You had mentioned that there are 7 buses that were down for maintenance, but 4 of them were scheduled to be completed repairs by the end of December. Do we know if all 4 of those buses are back in?
Right, correct. They are. We had 7 down. We have 4 down, actually 2 that are down right now.
Excellent news.
So it's trending in the right direction, but the month of December and early January has been problematic.
Okay, thank you so much for that update.
Thank you. Councilmember Schwarzman.
One more before you sit down, Mr. Horn. And so if someone has a particular question about a route or a bus, or they get on the bus and they don't see schedules posted there, should they put in a request on Ask Slow, or what's the best way to get their immediate issue answered?
That is a great question, and I would like to plug Ask Slow one more time during this time. So Ask Slow is an application that the city has. It's a mobile application available on Android and iPhone. Why it's of value to the community, and specifically for this case, is it will work for slow transit issues or information needed, but it'll work for a pothole. There's many different things that application will work for. So if they put in a request through Ask Slow, we can route it to the appropriate person and ensure that it gets addressed in a timely way. So if you go to the city's website, slowcity.org, and type in and search for Ask Slow, that'll bring it up. And you can also look at the app stores for the particular phone that you may have. So that would be a good way to get information.
And if you don't use a computer or an app on your phone, is there a phone number that people can call?
There is. I don't.
Right now, I see the non-dispatch, non-emergency dispatch number on the Ask Slow page. Greg, is that correct? Mr. Herman?
Specific to slow transit, it's 594-8090 or slowtransit@slowcity.org.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Great. I had Councilmember Pease, sorry, when we were trying to change microphones. Here we go. Councilmember Pease.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to thank our speakers and the heartfelt testimony about the situation in the war in Israel and Gaza and the impacts in Gaza in particular. And I appreciate the intent, the interest in a ceasefire, of course. And for those who, we did talk about this at a prior council meeting, and I continue to feel that as a local government that we're not in a position to be the center of a community dialogue on that issue. And that as individuals, we can be very effective in reaching out to our federal representatives who are the ones who are making these decisions. And yet at the same time, I just want to say how much I appreciate the building of awareness. I think this is, it's absolutely appropriate to come to this body and share emotions and information. And so I appreciate everyone being here. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Vice Mayor Marks.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with Councilmember Pease. We've been over this a couple of times. But I had a question for Mr. Horn, unfortunately. You're getting a workout today. So I think from what I understand from what Ms. Justice was saying, that some of the people who ride the buses would like to be able to see the route in hard copy inside the bus. Is that something that it shouldn't be too hard, right?
No, it shouldn't.
That's something that normally is done in buses around the world. So I'm just curious why we don't have it, and if it'd be possible to do that, because many people are not wired to their phone, and especially the people who might be riding the bus. So.
Yeah, I agree with you, and we will correct. There should be printed maps, there should be material available, and if there's not, we'll correct it.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who was here in person as well as on Zoom for sharing your thoughts and where we're at. So we will move forward to the consent agenda, and wanted to ask first, my colleagues have anything they'd like to pull? Vice Mayor Marks?
I just have a comment on 5C. Okay.
Does anyone else have comments on 5A, B, or C before we go any further? Okay, go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Well, 5C is adopt the 2023 County Joinder Amendment to the Second Amended and Restated Joint Powers Agreement of the Integrated Waste Management Authority. What that really means is that the County of San Luis Obispo is going to rejoin the Integrated Waste Management Authority after having pulled out about 2 years ago and spent over $2 million of taxpayers' money making their own little mini IWMA inside of their Public Works Department. So if we pass this tonight, we'll be the 5th city to have done so. 4 have done so already, and that means that it will be a majority. So it's significant if we pass this tonight. That's all I wanted to say.
All right, thank you. I will ask for public comment on any consent items.
Yes, we have 2. For item 5K and, 5J.
Thank you.
So the first one is Jacob Dewhurst, and the next one would be Scott Collins.
And apologies, is this the right time to talk about the parking lot? Perfect. Yeah, so I'm a resident of San Luis Obispo. I live on Pepper Street, the corner of Pepper and Mill roundabout. And that parking lot is very close to the community that I walk in in the community that I live in every single day. And one thing I just want to tell the community and tell the council is that that is a very walkable community, and a community that, in my mind, is a great place to explore alternative modes of transportation besides just falling back to the easy, let's build a parking lot, let's build a parking lot. There's plenty of stuff that San Luis Obispo needs, and I don't think a parking lot is at the top of that list. You can see the homeless people that sit outside City Hall when I walked in tonight. Maybe we can build housing. Maybe we can build more parks. Maybe we can build community gathering places. I would just like the city to explore alternative options that aren't building a new parking lot, putting in Tesla chargers, or putting in a parking structure. Parking lots, Tesla chargers, and parking structures aren't a community space. They really aren't even used for a majority of the time. If you look at our parking structures at night, they sit empty. Even most weekdays, they're not completely full. So why would we consider building a new parking lot? The solution to traffic and the solution to parking problems is not to build new lanes and not to build new parking lots. There's plenty of things and plenty of studies that have showed induced demand happens. You build more lanes, more people will come and drive in those lanes. You give people the option to just drive as far as they want, then they're going to take that option. I'd also like to tell the city to consider the fact that a way to take steps towards building alternative forms of transportation, encourage people to walk, encourage people to bike, is not to build new parking lots. And if the city really would like to build into a future where we don't have cars as the only mode of transportation, because realistically in SLO, that's one of the only modes of transportation. I ride my bike regularly and I walk regularly, but a lot of people don't ride their bikes, especially in SLO. I love our new bike lanes. I love to ride our bike lanes a lot, but a lot of our bike lanes are just painted bike gutters that have no protection, and I hardly see old people or young children riding their bikes. And I think that we have plenty of steps we can do in SLO besides building new parking lots. That's an amazing community. There's plenty of businesses. There's 2 coffee shops. I think there's 4 restaurants. Just down the block, there's another 3. There's a convenience store. There's a Vons or I can't remember the store, but a grocery store just nearby. There's plenty of things that you can walk around to and get in that community. You don't need to have people driving in and parking. You should build housing. You should build parks. Let the community engage. Give them a place that they can engage, because frankly, there aren't a lot of places in that neighborhood, and I think that that neighborhood deserves more places for recreation, more places for people to live, and more places for just people in general. We're not a city of cars, we're a city of people, and I encourage you to build to be a city of people and encourage people to walk around, ride their bikes, and not take their car.
Thank you so much.
Scott Collins.
Talk about housing right now.
Yes, good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. Happy New Year. I'm Scott Collins, Executive Director for the Housing Authority of San Luis Obispo. I'm speaking on behalf of item 5K. And just want to extend my gratitude and thanks to the City Council and your staff for your generous support of this 100% affordable housing project on Orchid, which, when it's complete, will house folks who are homeless, those are at risk of homelessness, and other special needs populations, which we all know is the #1 issue we're facing, amongst many others, of course, in our community, but it's touching all aspects of our lives. So projects like these take a total team effort. HASLO, city, county, state, federal government, all players in this, all extending everything they can to make this come to fruition. And with this item tonight, our partner at TEMA, who is graciously allowing us to utilize $300,000 of additional funding if the council approves that tonight, so that we can move forward on the shovel-ready project. We've been in touch with TEMA about how we can support them with their project. They have some needs to inch it along, and maybe even some vouchers from our voucher system. So we definitely want to see their project come to fruition. We've partnered with them on other projects as well. So the plan is to close financing on January 22nd, so your contribution will make that possible, in addition to the other resources you've already put into play for this project. We'll start in February and complete by the end of 2025. That'll be 40 units, again, serving those who are homeless, at risk of homelessness, or other special needs populations. I also want to thank staff and council for their great work in making sure we got CDBG funds for this project that was very much in question all the way down to the wire. And We had a meeting with the highest levels of housing urban development to get the right answer, so thank you. The County Board of Supervisors approved $1.4 million, moving ARPA funds from another project to this as well. They stepped up, and then we're going to bring forward about $400,000 to $500,000 of HASLO funds to close the gap. This is the unfortunate reality of construction in 2024. The costs are escalating, interest rates are still very high, insurance costs are growing. So this is what we face. So again, a total team effort, and really appreciate your support. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
No, there are not.
Okay. I have some comments on, I think, 4 different items. First, I just wanted to say, follow up with Councilmember Marks on 5C. I'm very excited, hopefully, that we'll be moving this forward to have the county and all of the cities finally back together again with waste management. I think that's wonderful. I'm also just really excited to continue to see the charger infrastructure on 5D continue to grow for our electric vehicles. We talked about it at the last meeting as well, and just really excited to see that continue. And, you know, 5E and F are things that just happen every day. They're things that we just kind of take care of things as the city. And I just wanted to highlight that. I know it sounds really obvious, and I don't want to spend pull items, but you know, when we talked about the storms today during our ribbon cutting for San Luis Drive, there are so many things that the city does on a regular basis to keep us all just afloat. Our water turning on, our lights turning on, our roads working, our housing working. And so I just want to say thank you to the staff for continuing to be prepared for us at a moment's notice. And I wanted to thank Kenny McCarthy. He has applied and is accepted to be on the Citizens Revenue Enhancement Oversight Commission, lovingly known as the REOC. And I really appreciate the community members who continue to hold our council and our staff accountable for our funding and our budget. One thing that was mentioned earlier during public comment was where our money goes. And something I just want to make sure you all can always see is our budget is available on our website. Our REOC's review of all of our funding is available on our website. And I will say that we are not spending any money, and I forgot to mention this earlier, any money going towards any of the wars that are happening globally beyond, whether it is the conflict in Gaza and Israel, whether it is Congo, whether it is Ukraine, we do not put our money towards that. So I just wanted to kind of say that from our budget. And I just wanted to also thank Scott Collins, as he was mentioning earlier today, as well as thank TEMA for working together as partners with our staff and with us. This is a huge, huge, huge project, and constantly working on how do we make all of the deadlines and the grants work in tandem so that we can get these housing projects come to fruition. It's just an amazing amount of work, and I'm just greatly thankful. So a lot of gratitude for today's consent agenda, but as I was reading through it, maybe it's because we had 2 weeks for a packet and I could really ponder it a little bit more. But I just wanted to say thank you, and really excited about what we have before us to vote. Any other comments? All right, Councilmember Pease.
I'll move the consent agenda.
Thank you. Councilmember Shorsman.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you. Can we have roll call, City Clerk?
Vice Mayor Pease?
Yes.
Councilmember Shorsman?
Yes.
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Councilmember Marks?
Yes.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you so much. We'll go ahead and take a quick 10-minute break and see you back at 7. I rarely get to use the gavel, so, you know. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate. We're going to go ahead and get restarted. I appreciate the time for the break, and just want to say publicly happy birthday to Miss Dietrich. She didn't even hear me. All right. Oh, maybe she did. Okay. We're going to go ahead and move forward to the public hearing and business items. And first, 6A is the introduction of an ordinance amending Municipal Code Section 9.22.040, Safety Enhancement Zones. And I'm thankful to see Courtney Keno from Cal Poly also in the audience, maybe to answer some questions. And Chief Scott, we'll go ahead and pass it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council, and appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you all tonight. Myself and Deputy Chief Michael will be presenting to you a recommendation for some changes to our current Safety Enhancement Zone ordinance. As we've discussed recently, especially in front of this body, that our community has been experiencing some greater impacts from noise of large gathering type calls associated with traditional holiday times such as St. Patrick's Day and Halloween. Aside from the anecdotal observations, our community has given us some complaints and some feedback about how we've been doing regarding these events. The data shows an increase in disruptive behaviors outside of the times the Safety Enhancement Zone was specifically envisioned to address. The changes tonight are strategically focused to adjust the ordinance for a more positive impact on as it was originally intended when it was drafted. Tonight's recommendation is to introduce an amendment to the section 9.22.040 of the San Luis Obispo Municipal Code to add additional safety enhancement zone dates prior to and inclusive of St. Patrick's Day and Halloween. At this point, I'll go ahead and pass the presentation over to Deputy Chief Michael to provide the details of the recommendations.
Great, thank you. Can you all see the presentation? Oh. Am I doing something incorrect? You know, thank you.
It's okay. I like my PD.
Thank you. All right. No, this is perfect. Thank you. Okay, now we'll get going. Mayor, City Council members, thank you so much for giving us this time tonight to talk a little bit about this. So what I want to spend a little bit of time initially doing as we go through this is talk a little bit about what the Safety Enhancement Zone is for everybody that's here to understand it, to talk a little bit about the history of how we got to where we are and the why are we here tonight. So really what the Safety Enhancement Zone is, in 2004, we introduced this ordinance, as the chief mentioned earlier, that at certain times of year and specific dates, the entire city is placed under this Safety Enhancement Zone. And it covers these specific items that you see on your screen: possession or consumption of alcohol, social hosts, noise complaints, unruly gatherings, dangerous deadly weapons, and urinating public. So it's a little bit narrow in focus. It's very particular on more nuisance type of behaviors, things that we can do to enhance our city and being good neighbors. So when we are not in a safety enhancement zone, what this means is that those items that I mentioned in there, there's a fine structure. And under the regular offenses, you can see here, the first offense is $350 for the different items that were on there, $700 and up to $1,000 on the third offense. Now, when the safety enhancement zone is enacted, these fines are basically doubled. So you see the first offense is $700 and all subsequent offenses are $1,000. So how do we get here? Why do we have a safety enhancement zone? So like I mentioned, back in we had an event in this town that many of us maybe remember or don't remember how long you've been here, is we had Mardi Gras. And unfortunately, at a certain point, it got out of control, unruly. Things happened that we needed to create some tools and come up with some ideas to better mitigate some of the behaviors that we saw during this. So that's the first time we saw the safety enhancement zone implemented. It turned out to be an effective tool. It's not a fix-all. I want to just make that clear for everything. It's just a tool that we use to help us to better create a better environment, safer environment for everybody. After that, in 2010 and 2013, we implemented it for Halloween and St. Patrick's Day. And the start of school. So like I mentioned earlier, with these additional dates, we still have those double fines for the specific items that are listed in the municipal code. So why are we here looking at changing or amending it? And the reason is we have noticed in the past few years, and I have some data to show, that we've had an increase in some of these negative party behaviors. And just frankly, on these particular dates of what currently is the safety enhancement zone, the parties and the nuisance behaviors have moved away from those dates in order to get around this ordinance in some effects. So one of the biggest things that we kind of came across as we really looked into this and as we saw this past year is safety becoming a big issue. And that's really my personal driving force behind this, is because I don't want to see, I don't care who it is that is put in an unsafe situation. I want to be able to have services, be able to get to them, and be able to render them. And when we have these unusually large events, that sometimes creates an issue for us to get in there. Neighborhood wellness, of course, and really this amendment helps us create some more personal responsibility and awareness. Like I said, I was going to show you some data and some information. There's a lot here. But as you can see, and there are some pandemic years in there, so, but we're as a high impact during that time, but it did dip a little bit. But we are continually seeing a rise in our calls for service, the types of complaints and issues that are specifically addressed by the safety enhancement zone. But as you see in the top chart, that is the actual day that the safety enhancement zone's in effect. The bottom chart is the dates that the safety enhancement is not in effect, and we're seeing equal to or greater than issues and numbers that we're seeing there in those days. So like I mentioned earlier, it's kind of where they're trying to get around that extra penalty. Halloween, similarly, we see this similar issues. It's a little more difficult to drill down Halloween because Halloween is more of a entire weekend potentially event or multi-day event versus St. Patrick's Day or then sanctioned St. Friday's Day being a singular day events. So our proposed amendments are exactly what I just talked about, St. Patrick's Day and Halloween. And what we're proposing to amend when it comes to these is, mind you, this gets a little complicated, so I got pictures, which are great, which will help us get through it, but I'm gonna walk through the actual verbiage of what we're doing. So currently on St. Patrick's Day, the safety enhancement zone is only for the day itself. And it's from 12:01 a.m. to the following day at 7 a.m. What we're proposing is including St. Patrick's Day and the 2 weekends prior to. So what that would look like is 12:00 a.m. on the Friday, 12 a.m. on the Friday morning, continuing through till 7 a.m. on the, concluding on Monday, on the 2 weekends prior. Like I said, we're good with some pictures. So here's some charts that project out the next 2 years. And why I want to project it out is to give you a visual image. Like next year, you have quite a few more days, but then the following years you see it drops off because of where St. Patrick's Day actually falls. So because St. Patrick's Day falls on the Sunday this next year, it covers that entire weekend plus the 2 previous weekends. But in 2025, you see it falls outside of that weekend, so it only covers the previous weekend and the weekend before. Halloween, similarly, but a little bit different. Currently, Halloween itself is covered with the safety enhancement zone, or if Halloween falls on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, then the safety enhancement zone encompasses the whole weekend. And the changes we're looking for in this is that same setup for that, but capturing the weekend before. And what that would look like is, and projected out, looks pretty similar for 2 years, but it would just basically be the weekend of Halloween and then the weekend prior. And so to mention, you notice in Halloween, I've only captured 1 weekend prior, and St. Patrick's Day is 2. And the reason why for this is this was a data-driven approach. This wasn't just pulling something out of the air saying this sounds like a good idea. We really looked at where we had some of these behaviors that we wanted to curb, and it was a reasonable to look at for Halloween only that weekend before, and St. Patrick's Day, that's more of a moving target to where that's going to land for that unsanctioned St. Friday's Day. So when we started working through this, we felt it was very important to do as large outreach as we could. So we immediately started getting with all of our stakeholders and having meetings with them. And so this is a list of all that we met with. Numerous organizations up on Cal Poly campus, meeting with the student organizations, got a lot of excellent feedback from them on, which actually helped model my policy even further and model this PowerPoint presentation you're getting, because we gave them a very similar one as we walked through it with them. And from their feedback, we were able to better kind of refine and come up with how we were gonna set up this to be the most appropriate to accomplish what we wanted to accomplish. So what we're trying to accomplish ultimately is like I said, we're got data-driven approach how we propose this change, but we're trying to minimize the adverse effects on the community. We're not trying to stop the celebrations and the parties and those types of things, because that's going to happen. We just want it to be reasonable. We want it to be safe. And we also want, if it's not, we want those tools to go and help slow it down or modify the behavior. That's what I have for you, so if there's any questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, thank you so much for that presentation. So I noticed there's a bit of a distance between, the number of calls that come in versus the number of citations that are issued based on those calls during the weekends. And so my question is kind of around, would increased citations under our current structure have the same or similar effect? And if you could maybe get into a little bit of a discussion of why enhancing the SES would be a better way to move forward with this versus just doing more citations under the current structure.
Thank you for that. That's a great question, because as we've looked at it and as we've done our outreach and talked to many of the organization and folks, one of the big deterrents, because we'd rather not just cite a bunch of people, our goal is to deter it, not to even have to deal with that citation, is that increased fine is a big deterrent. And so we don't want to, as we leave it lower and there's opportunities to, like we said, we have these dates that move outside of it to avoid those big fines. And so we can come in and issue those citations, but it doesn't carry that same deterrence we're finding. So we're just, again, it's just, we still have party registration. We still have all these types of things that you can do during these times to responsibly have these things, but yet not to grow out of control. And that's where that deterrent comes in for us.
And thank you for that. And kind of in the spirit of that, I know we've talked about the safety enhancement zones and its role in turning the tides during the Mardi Gras celebrations when they escalated to a certain level. And I was wondering if you could talk to me a little bit about what we saw, what the pattern was. Was it an immediate effect? How long did it take to turn the tides on that? Just give me a little bit of history there.
Excellent. So I was here for Mardi Gras. I've been since 2000, so I experienced that. Mardi Gras is maybe not as good example as when we implemented the Halloween and the St. Patrick's Day and the start of school, but it is a good starting place because we took out all the tools on that one because it basically turned into a riot. So that required a major upstaffing for many weekends for a few years to really get it to where we are today. I don't want it to get to that point. That's unsafe, that's injury prone, that's property damage, and that's money not well spent. So, but it was a tool that was effective. Now looking kind of forward, when we saw, okay, this tool worked, how is it really gonna work without doing those pieces? And so we implemented for these other things and we saw, okay, it worked. It did a reduction. It did that awareness. It did that deterrent to where really, start of school, really not an issue anymore. And it is a good enough deterrent there. These other dates, in my opinion, even though we see the numbers and they're not great, I think it's better than what it could be.
So am I understanding correctly that the goal isn't necessarily to issue more citations, but it's to use that higher citation as the deterrent method? And then is that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly, our goal is, I'm trying to put ourselves out of work, right? And that's really our goal, because if we have a safe enough community, then there's less for us to do.
And I just had one last question. There was some questions from the community about the role of the partnership between Cal Poly and the city and how we kind of get ahead of this, and also thinking about some of the other issues within the neighborhood, potentially satellite fraternity and sorority homes, that kind of thing. And so how do we work alongside Cal Poly to deal with these particular issues and then finding those sort of nuisance locations?
Thank you for the question. And this is, it's a very active conversation that we're having with our partners at Cal Poly. And as you mentioned from some of the write-in comments about the fraternity houses that were being off campus or co-located in the neighborhoods, which are now create a zoning issue for our city. And so looking ahead, how do we influence those, our student body individuals that live in the neighborhoods to be good partners to the neighborhood. And so part of it is, having a response where they're gonna have to make a calculated decision. If you're gonna throw a massive party, there are gonna be consequences and they're gonna be very, very expensive to do that. The other part, how do you build relationships with the people that live there? And so the goal is to keep people from coming to our community for these destination events. The second part of that is dealing with the people that are there every day and that are neighbors and continuing to build that relationship. And so I think the police department plays a role in both aspects of that. One is coming up with significant consequences and being aggressive and proactive at addressing behavior that's disruptive to the neighborhood. And then in the off times, working to facilitate good partnerships and communication with our neighbors that live there with our Cal Poly students.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Schwarzman.
Hi, thank you. Those were some of my questions, so I appreciate Councilmember Francis's questions. I think you might have answered a couple others, but I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. Party registration is still allowed during all of these times. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And then maybe you could go back to the slide where it talked about Halloween a little bit,
okay.
Where it showed the Halloween dates. I was trying to read through what is proposed there, and I appreciate the 24-25 sort of graphical representation of how it would work. And I was kind of trying to think through each scenario, and it seems to me, so Wednesday, if Halloween occurs on a Wednesday, then would the safety enhancement zone be the weekend before and the week after?
No.
Or would it be Wednesday through, how would that
So
work?
if Halloween falls on a Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, it's going to be it'll start on the previous Thursday and work through the weekend.
Okay,
and then
so
include Halloween itself.
Okay, so essentially Wednesday's the weird day in my opinion, because that would make the safety enhancement zone be basically a full week starting from the Thursday before through the Wednesday night of Halloween.
minus the Monday, Tuesday, it'll end Monday morning, and then it'll start again for
Okay.
Halloween itself.
Okay, okay, it
So-
doesn't go consecutively
No,
through.
it won't.
Okay.
It'll, that's why, we looked at it and why we didn't push it the weekend after. We don't see data that shows that there's anything that we need for that. So we looked at the best way we could do this is, that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is kind of a weird, it's weird, but yet it won't carry through, no.
Okay. And just for perspective, obviously the call volume on Halloween is kind of off the charts. But St. Friday's Day and St. Patrick's Day, the last 5 years in the neighborhood of 95 to 180 calls. So how is that just to give it context, in comparison to a typical average weekend day?
Yeah, so that's a great question because, as we look throughout it's hard to drill down to what we have as an average, but it is significantly higher than what we would have on our average weekend. I mean, that's really our highest call volumes throughout the weekend. So we really focused on the weekend. So it's significantly higher. I mean, at least double or more.
And do we find that the party registration process has been a helpful tool in addition to something like the safety enhancement zone, or?
Yes, we're finding it very effective. It's been a great tool. Actually, this last event through Halloween, we had one of our highest registrations for parties. And the great part about that is people that are registering their party don't want to get out of control. We had more of the registered parties actually call and ask us, hey, can you help us? Because this actually is getting out of control. So we didn't show up and write a citation. We showed up and helped. So, and to get it back to where they, can have the responsible party they were looking to have.
That's great to hear. I think that's all I have.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Chief Scott, did you want to add something?
Yes, and just to dovetail on Councilmember Schwarzman's question, when we looked at the data for the Halloween weekend calls for service, I believe it was Saturday, I don't want to misspeak, but it was one of the days over that weekend period. It was the highest volume of calls that we've ever had in a single day. And it kind of actually outpaced what we see with St. Fridays and St. Patty's and the other holidays, so it's pretty significant.
Thank you. Councilmember Pease.
Thank you so much. Just two questions. One is, I remember Mardi Gras, one of the big concerns there was how it became a draw for folks from out of town, other colleges or just other places. And so I'm wondering if we feel that the enhancement zone, safety enhancement zone, is going to kind of deter the parties overall such that we won't get the draw from out of town? Or do we need to have like some kind of a different communication so that the out of town folks are also discouraged from coming in, even though they didn't get a flyer on their porch? What's our thought about out of town?
So our operating theory is don't come, it's not worth it. And so when we have individuals that travel to our community, most of them that we have discovered have a safe place here. They're staying overnight or in advance of the holiday or the activity. And so they have a connection here. A lot of people aren't just traveling and then going home, that night or the same day. So hopefully the message is dispersed as effectively as the party messages have been, that don't come here, don't come and stay with us because it's not worth making the trip. It's just going to be too costly. So we feel that that's a smart approach, and we know that has worked in other areas where they've experienced the similar type of issues that we're experiencing, and so we feel that will be effective.
Great, thanks. And then my other question is, I'm kind of doing a little data interpretation, and I'm wondering if you could just double check my logic here. So on the St. Friday's Day data, they show for the actual St. Patrick's Day safety enhancement zone, the open container for 2023, there were, it looks like 0 citations. But then for the actual St. Friday's Day, the March 18th, there were 26. Am I interpreting that is because the parties were in the street, and whereas on actual St. Patrick's Day, people tend to be downtown and at the bars, right? So that's what we're kind of looking at, is the street party environment of folks walking between.
Yes, that's exactly what we're seeing in response to this, and a lot of driving force behind why we're looking at expanding it outside of the actual day itself, because you see the behavior shifts, because it turns from, frequenting the downtown and the bars and having more moderate house parties to one massive, this past year, thousands of people in the street, an entire block party. So, and I also want to mention, I like that you brought up the point earlier about the communication piece, because as we did our outreach, we heard from a lot of the student organizations that was really one of the big asks from them is better communication from us, which we can do. I'm ready for constructive criticism, and in when it is, what it is, all those types of things. And so I really appreciated that feedback from the organizations as we did it, so it can make us be better at what we're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have about 8 questions. Thank you. I appreciate some of the questions, took off the other questions I was going to ask. Kind of talking about communication, what you just shared is, today is January 9th. Yesterday was the 8th, the first day of school back for Cal Poly. Cuesta hasn't even come back yet, and I don't see them on the stakeholder conversation. So I know the desire of being able to have enough time to have an ordinance and then a second reading and make sure we have enough time to get communication out. That being said, if we didn't actually involve as many of the Cal Poly and the Cuesta students, it seems as though we're not getting kind of feedback from both ends of the world. So was curious why Cuesta wasn't involved and why to bring the ordinance back today versus the 23rd. You're welcome.
No, and thank you, Madam Mayor, for your question. So we started these conversations about a little over 6 months ago, back in summer. And so we started the outreach initiatives back when school was in session prior to the break for the holidays to communicate out as broadly as we could that this was coming, to get feedback on how we may adjust any recommendations, which we've put into the document before you today. The other part is, I think when you were talking about Cuesta, and it's certainly no intentional slight to ignore any of our stakeholders. However, to be very clear, this is branded as a Cal Poly event. It's hosted by houses that are students that go to Cal Poly and that reside in that neighborhood adjacent to Cal Poly. So I'm sure there are Cuesta students that do attend, but I would not consider them stakeholders because they are not holding and facilitating this event. And it is non-sanctioned. This is not a sanctioned event, not recognized by either Cal Poly or the city.
Thank you. And then when on page 395, and you just had the slide up earlier talking about when the SES would start and stop, et cetera, if you don't mind pulling that back up. Oh, so sorry.
For Halloween or for St. Pat's?
St. Patrick's Day, right there.
And also, real quick, we did talk to SCLC, which Cuesta is represented on that. So we did that.
And they said, could you bring it back on the 23rd? So that's why I'm bringing it up.
Okay. Yes, yeah.
So on St. Patrick's Day, it seems like the proposed would be, sorry, let me try to, I wrote this down so I wouldn't mess up. Okay, so if we started the SES at 10 p.m. on Thursday, if St. Patrick's is on a Friday to Sunday, it seems like that would make more sense because obviously you can make noise till 10 p.m. Thursday is the Friday Eve, right? So people, even having nothing to do with St. Patrick's, people go out on Thursday night, maybe make it to class on Friday or make it to work on Friday, or they don't have any classes because a lot of colleges don't have classes. So it seems like we would want to start it at 10 p.m. on Thursday versus waiting and saying, go ahead and party on Thursday night and Friday morning. What was the thought process there?
So we looked at, we actually looked at that. We looked at mirroring, starting it on Thursday like all the others. But again, trying to be as reasonable as we can with this ask and not trying to be, it's going to be, because we're asking for 2 entire weekends prior. And looking at the data points and things like that, we just didn't have things to support it. But having that information that like I said, it's a moving target, so that could be a thought. And we just didn't want to have an over ask of something and abuse what we're trying to do here. We're just trying to be as reasonable as we could.
Makes sense. Just seeing that that's what Halloween, what we do for Halloween, seems like we would mirror that for St. Patrick's Day.
So Halloween, and what we looked at on that particularly is Thursday Farmers Market is a huge Halloween draw. So that's where we pushed Halloween all the way to Thursday.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Just more of a comment later. On page 405, sorry, I'm trying to read my handwriting, apparently was not. Oh, yes, okay. So on page 405, there was a comment that I know there's more to this, but it wasn't explained in the notes. So it says that the PD just doesn't do anything during the unruly gatherings. And so I just thought if you could please share why the police responses they do during the large gatherings. You could keep it on.
Okay. You know, I like to watch the light. So we, in particular, looking back, and it really depends on manpower and on what the staffing we have and things like that. And if we do not, like for instance, this past St. Friday's Day, we had a much larger, we planned for a large event. This was 3 times larger than we even thought. It really, unfortunately caught us a little bit by surprise, even though we had a really good plan going into it. And so when you get it, that you just at that point, you start managing safety. And that's our first thing, right? And there's a lot of things that are going on. Yes, we could take action against, and we tried some creative approaches to doing some unruly gathering, and we did do some unruly gathering citations during that event, but probably not as many as we could have, but we had to look at the bigger picture of how do we not only keep the residents as safe as we can, our officers, and all the people that were participating in the party. So that's really what drove that. Now, if we had the personnel and the things that we could do, then absolutely, yes, we would be enforcing the unruly gatherings and those types of things. We just have to weigh those out at the time.
Great, thank you so much. And on page 408, it talks about landlords, and I know that obviously there's, the citation goes to the landlord as well if there's a party and negative actions are happening. Do we have kind of the top offending houses? Do we talk to the landlords as well? How does that work?
Yes, we have a really robust approach on this. So not only, first offenses, the ones that are new to us, of course, the letters go out, the citations go out, those types of things. We have repeat offenders. Then what we do is we task our officers to go down during what we call sober hours, which is during the day, to contact the residents and have a more in-depth conversation with them and talk to them about the issues. And we also reach out to the landlord. Christine Wallace does an excellent job of working with the landlords and dealing with that end when we're having issues. And as it grows, we have other tools we can do. But yes, there's a shared responsibility among the residents and the landlords.
Okay, thank you. And there was also a comment asking about kind of a restorative justice model, someone having to come apologize to people they have woken up at 3 in the morning. I assume that's not an OSRR, the Students of Rights and Responsibility Office. I'm not sure if that's something that the DA, would that be something that we push? What does that look like?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I did read that comment as well. It's very interesting. And I know the city is exploring other avenues for restorative justice across, some of the other areas that we work in. So this would be a function of the courts and in partnership with our prosecuting attorney. So step one would be to write the citation, alleviate the circumstance that we're being confronted. And then after the fact, the courts could look at some options for how to mitigate or work with the neighborhood and the violator to work through that issue.
Okay, thank you so much. And I guess really my other questions are probably more in the for Cal Poly. I know we've talked, I think later on the same page 408, we talk about we work with Cal Poly, and I've been in many of those meetings and try very hard to hear where we're going. And I know there are some alternative activities that often are planned. and in investigations, you don't get to always hear what happens to the discipline. So I guess for the community, how do they get to find out what are the alternative activities that are planned, what kind of disciplines happen? What does that look like for the community to feel that they understand there's some sort of justice that's happening?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, and Courtney is here with us today, so she may choose to use her time to speak to those questions. But again, when we talk about working with Cal Poly and especially Rights and Discipline Board with Cal Poly, they've been very proactive in communicating with us that, you know, when things happen, when cases are sent over, that something is done. We are not necessarily the tool to share out that information. A lot of times we don't have names and things like that. But I know those conversations and questions could be directed to Cal Poly, especially days after these significant events. We're very transparent about the stats and generally who or generally where we're initiating our activity. And so it would probably be perfectly okay to communicate with Cal Poly, did anything happen as a result of these police actions.
Great, thank you so much. I know I've seen some of those emails explaining how many hospital visits or whatever may have happened, so thank you. Thanks for going through all my questions, and Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, I just wanted to quick follow up. I think the mayor might have brought this up, but the term moving target was used, and I was thinking about this as we were going through the packet and all the information. To what extent are we just going to end up chasing these alternative events around the calendar, and do we really feel like this set date structure is the best way to approach trying to deal with this kind of systemic issue?
Thank you for the question. So I think we want to be responsible and measured in our approach to this. That is part of the partnership with Cal Poly and our student community members. And so we think this is an effective alternative and probably the least we could do incrementally. There are certainly other options we could take in the future, but I will say the fact that we're talking about St. Fratty's Day, that an event was created to circumvent the safety enhancement zone, I think lends to the credibility that this is an effective tool. And so right now we're trying to be very surgical and very tactical at focusing on simply these events and not just blanketing months of time, because to get a citation, this is very costly and very impactful. And so we want to be very measured in our response, but we want to be effective.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councilmember Shorsman.
Thanks. Yeah, another question came up as the mayor was going through hers. So this is, we're targeting St. Patrick's Day, St. Fratty's Day, as it's become known, and Halloween, and others have mentioned some of the other historical days that have maybe lent themselves to safety enhancement zones. And I'm just wondering, before we kind of seal the deal on this amendment, are these really the only days that we feel like right now? The other days and times of the year that have been issues before have kind of resolved themselves based on the enforcement actions that we've done, or not that we can't amend this again in the future, but do we feel like this covers it?
Thank you, Councilmember Shorsman. And not to overuse the term, it is a moving target. And I think some of our best policies are must be flexible. And so the fact that we have really only zeroed in on these two dates, speaks to the other actions being effective. I think if this is successful today, and we do eventually adopt the changes to the ordinance, we very well could see another time somewhere on the calendar turn into the most popular day to gather. And so we would probably come back and maybe make some adjustments in the future. So just like it has with some of the other events that are no longer a problem for us. But I think right now, based on our data, and it is as Deputy Chief Michael mentioned, it's a data-driven approach, and this is what the data tells us is most significant. Certainly, if we're effective, there could quite possibly be other dates that are more impactful to us.
City Manager, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Just to add on to Chief Scott's comments. I think that, my experience in working in college communities for the last, 30 years is that, we will have to watch and measure and see what the outcomes are, and just we've done. I think it's important to kind of ground a lot of this effort in thinking in the civility report. Councilmember Marks probably remembers the work that led up to some of the safety enhancement zones and the adjustments. And so that has been something that I think Chief Scott has mentioned is we're going to have to continue to monitor and see how effective the ordinance is and whether or not we're achieving the outcome. I think to Councilmember Francis' question, we're likely to see probably some adjustments and behaviors. And, really it comes down to, we know that people, particularly college students, are in the part of their life they're looking to socialize, and we want them to do that responsibly for their safety. And so this safety enhancement zone is really designed to try to get to that issue and make sure we're providing a safe social atmosphere for them and also the community writ large. And then we work really hard with our Cal Poly partners. We can't do anything without Cal Poly. We've got some tools available to law enforcement officers, but really a lot of the conversations happens, through the referral process to Cal Poly, through their Office of Rights and Responsibilities. And that's really where we see, hopefully, when we have incidents where we can ultimately see the sustained behavior changes.
I think the confusing nature of not knowing when, especially the issues with St. Friday's Day, and that seems to be the one that's the moving target the most, there's an inherent conflict with a city organization needing to be transparent about its ordinance and the way it works and the days that the safety enhancement zone is in effect and the nature of a potentially changing date. So I don't know, I guess that's not really a question, but we're obligated to be clear about when we're going to be doing an enforcement, and that creates the opportunity for, if it really is an event that tries to circumnavigate that, it creates that sort of interesting dynamic where we're potentially always going to be chasing the issue. Last but not least, we did receive some comments about concerns about in these large gatherings when we've had sort of the block party that sort of evolves about the access for emergency vehicles. And I just wondered, if there isn't a medical emergency or something that happens on that block where there's this large presence in the street, how do we handle that?
Thank you, Councilmember Schwarzman. Just two things, if I may add, that in speaking to your first comment, we believe that communicating and being transparent and providing that information out as robustly as possible is the deterrent effect, and that's exactly what we're hoping to achieve. And our goal, as Deputy Chief Michael mentioned, is to write 0 citations and avoid penalizing anybody if we can. To your second point, we talk about the emergency vehicles, and we've seen this each year in response to St. Friday's Day, where we've had to go into an area that was overrun with people in the street to get an emergency apparatus or to get first responders in to render medical aid, and that has happened each year that I've been present. I've witnessed that. It's a very, very dangerous operation to do that, because typically we'll have to assemble a group of police officers to escort our EMS first responders into the location to get first aid. That takes time and a lot of planning, believe it or not, to get into the crowd, and that's a dangerous place for any of the first responders to be. The problem is time has a big time effect on how successful we are at rendering first aid, and so all of these steps take significant time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Marks.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I'll save my comments for the comment time, but I just wanted to say that I'm curious about reaching out to the fraternities and the sororities. What they do takes a great deal of organization and planning, and the Cal Poly students are very good at doing that. I've personally witnessed a number of these St. Patty Days in my neighborhood. And people come dressed all alike. They obviously have ordered stuff off the internet. I bet they're doing it now. You have to do it, or maybe in February. They have to, there's a lot of advanced planning that goes on, and I'm wondering if it's possible, maybe this is again a question for Courtney, but you'll have whole people coming out of a dorm, everybody's got striped white and green stockings. Well, how'd they do that? They ordered that stuff off the internet months ahead or weeks ahead. So there's a lot of organization, and I'm just curious if it's possible to nip some of this in the bud. I don't know if this is a police function or how that could be accomplished, but I think that it would have to. There would have to be somebody somewhere organizing all of this activity, getting people up at 3 in the morning, getting them all dressed in green outfits and out in the streets, and then somebody supplying the alcohol. So there's, it's not spontaneous is what I'm saying. So I'm wondering about what kind of outreach the city could do. Maybe this is a larger question.
Thank you, Councilmember Marks, and I would fully agree. It is a highly, highly planned, spontaneous event. And so I think any leading up, proactive communications, which we have a good history of doing that, and Cal Poly has been an excellent partner in helping us with those communications as well as delivering their own. And we typically review each other's work, and the messaging coming out from Cal Poly is exactly in lockstep with the police department, and it reinforces being a good neighbor. Find alternatives. Don't pour out into the street and make a nuisance type activity. And so I feel that being able to have those communications early and often, as well as showing what the repercussions are and designating, if you do choose to do these activities, this is what's in effect, and this is the financial penalty that you may incur.
Well, thank you for all the questions and thank you for all the answers. We'll move forward to public comment. And City Clerk, are there any people ready to speak?
Yes, we have 6 speakers, but I have to do some magic first.
That's fine. And if you are online, this is the time to raise your hand and be able to put your comment in, or your chance to put your comment in.
Our first speaker is Sandra Raleigh, then Mila Bulovich-Labar, and then Carolyn Smith.
Mayor Stewart and members of the council, my name is Sandra Rowley, and I'm speaking tonight for Residents for Quality Neighborhoods. We are each responsible for our own actions. It is possible to host, attend, or travel to and from a gathering without becoming loud and raucous, despite a myriad of evidence to the contrary. In addition to the almost every weekend disruptions in the northern neighborhoods, there are the blowout parties on St. Friday's Day and Halloween weekend. I won't go into specifics of this seriously chaotic nature of these mega parties. They have been clearly enumerated by others. In addition to individuals violating several of the city's ordinances, making streets impassable, and indulging in risky and nuisance behaviors, fraternities are not abiding by their own party registration policy and guidelines, which, among other things, says parties with alcohol must be closed events with a guest list, specifies the days and times parties are and are not allowed, forbids drinking games, and places limits on advertising the parties. We all experience Poly Royal and Mardi Gras. Outreach and education alone did not curb those events, and the years-long outreach and education has not made St. Fratty's Day or Halloween weekend any better. In fact, they've gotten worse. The presence of out-of-town guests further exacerbates the problems. The obvious next step is to enact the recommended expansions of the safety enhancement zones and see if that, plus strict enforcement, will result in noticeable improvement. The impetus for change needs to come from the top, as does oversight of fraternity activities. Hopefully, you have recognized that and will take the next step toward change by approving these two safety enhancement zones. Thank you. Oh, and my apologies, I have another commitment tonight, so I will have to leave.
That's okay, thank you.
Thank
You can always
you.
watch the recording.
Mila, Carolyn Smith, and then Olivia Momberg.
Good evening, Mayor Stewart and council members. My name is Mila Vujovic-Labar. I am here this evening as a community member and the Student Community Liaison Committee representative for the geographic neighborhoods, which includes those particularly close to Cal Poly, like the Alta Vista Neighborhood Association, Monterey Heights Neighborhoods Association, and the neighborhoods north of Foothill. This role has been rewarding and enlightening. I am hoping that you can fully support the requested safety enhancement zone expansion. It would be a very appropriate action on your part, given that today is indeed National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. The San Luis Obispo Police Department and residents need help to mitigate party noise, trash, and inappropriate behavior in our residential neighborhoods. One solution is to allow the police to broaden the periods of enforcement of the Safety Enhancement Zone ordinance for both Halloween celebrations and the expanding of the St. Fratty's Day event. The data with the dozens of party noise complaints recently on the police log, with most calls occurring after 10 p.m. is shocking. It takes a tremendous amount of courage and frustration for a resident to call the police to register a complaint, so chances are there were 2 to 3 times that amount of residents who were bothered but did not take the initiative to call. I am also concerned about the illegal fraternities that are operating in the R1 and R2 neighborhoods. The residents in those houses are hosting large parties that are extremely disturbing to their neighbors due to excessive noise and trash. As a teacher for 40 years in the San Luis Coastal Unified School District, I have had the personal commitment to educate teens on the dangers of alcohol and other drug abuse the entire time. Currently, in many K-12 school districts throughout the nation, there's a lack of comprehensive education on alcohol and other drug abuse, which has given rise to dangerous incidents involving alcohol and other drugs, such as fentanyl, on and off college campuses with this demographic. The Safety Enhancement Zone extension will be a step in the right direction to keeping all residents healthier and safer. I applaud the ongoing efforts of the San Luis Obispo Police Department and the staff of both Cal Poly and Cuesta to continue to keep young adults safe through education and warnings. There are so many college students who are indeed an asset to our community. There should not be an assumption that all students are behaving inappropriately. Some of them, however, need positive, healthy guidelines to follow and boundaries to allow them to have fun, but still be able to fulfill all of their dreams professionally and personally. This increased safety enhancement zone is indeed a proverbial stepping stone to success. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Carolyn Smith, Olivia Momberg, and then Timothy Looney.
Good evening, Mayor Stewart and council members. I've spoken before council numerous times throughout the many years I've been in RQN, asking for help to mitigate party noise in our residential neighborhoods. This time, I'm urging you to assist our police by broadening the periods of enforcement of the Safety Enhancement Zone ordinance per staff's report for both Halloween and expanding the St. Fratty's Day event. The hope is that it will help deter the extremely disturbing parties during those periods, but unquestionably, more needs to be done. During just this past September and October, there were 452 party noise complaints on the PD's log, with most calls occurring after 10 p.m. Remember, these aren't just numbers. They're real people calling the police for help because of extreme noise and fear of the unpredictable, alarming behaviors by large crowds of drunken partiers. Most likely, you didn't have to make any of those calls because fortunately, you have peace in your homes at night. You probably aren't woken up and kept awake until 2 a.m. by loud music, live bands, DJs, and partiers roaming yards and streets yelling and screaming. So other than Council Member Marks, it's probably difficult for you to imagine what it's like to live in an atmosphere of severe nocturnal disturbances. To coin a phrase from Rod Serling's classic TV series, The Twilight Zone, imagine, if you will, that you're a nurse who just completed an exhausting 12-hour shift at the hospital, crawling into bed and falling into a deep sleep, only to be jolted awake at midnight by loud music and shouting from crowds of partiers near blasting your bedroom. And imagine, if you will, you're a family with little children who finally get to sleep, only to be startled awake and frightened by illegal fireworks being set off at a fraternity party near your home with a live band blaring into your kid's bedroom. And imagine still you're recovering from surgery, COVID, or cancer treatment, and you're unable to get the desperate sleep needed to recover due to a party in the backyard of a house behind you with yelling and amplified music and bass speakers vibrating your windows until 2 a.m. These are all real experiences, by the way. I know it's truly difficult to imagine, so I challenge you to accept a recent invitation by an Alta Vista RQN member to visit her home on a weekend night to see for yourself what her family and neighbors are having to endure nearly every single weekend, and even worse on Halloween weekend and St. Friday's Day. When you do, you'll cross over and journey into a land with no boundaries of not only shocking sights and sounds, but a twilight zone, sort of like any other you could imagine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Olivia Mumberg, Timothy Looney, and our final speaker on this item is Stu Jenkins.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members. My name is Olivia Momberg, and I serve on Cal Poly's ASI External Affairs Committee. As a member of the committee, I would like to express my gratitude to the City of San Luis Obispo Police Department for presenting this information to us back in December. We respect the fact that they realized that this will affect a large portion of the Cal Poly students and reached out to us for student feedback. ASI looks forward to an ongoing relationship with the City of SLO and also the Police Department in the interest of student safety and communication. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Timothy Looney and then Stu Jenkins.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Timothy Lunny. I am a student here at Cal Poly studying aerospace engineering, as well as a member of Greek Life. And I am here asking you to reduce the amount of days proposed for the safety enhancement zone, as well as increase the awareness of what a safety enhancement zone is so that more students are aware. So obviously, as a member of a fraternity, we are known for holding social gatherings and everything like that. Obviously, as you guys have stated before, that this is most likely going to happen no matter what. I'm not talking about the block party, but people are going to be celebrating at their houses. So this block party that happened at the corner of Hathaway and Bond, as you guys know, we actually, among other organizations, have houses along that street. And we can't control who comes into our front yards and the spillover, especially from those coming from out of town like Santa Barbara or those in the radius. So what happens is we end up getting the unruly gathering penalty, which is, of course, an astronomical fine. And we suffer this, although we really can't control what goes on. And we feel like that this increased safety enhancement zone will just increase the likelihood of us receiving a penalty that we are undeserving of. On top of that, although we have houses along the street, we're an organization, and the members of our organization who have these houses get our backing and are obviously financially compensated for the ticket. There are other people along that street who don't have this support and will have to pay this ticket individually. I can speak on behalf of some friends, some neighbors that we have. They get hit every single year. We do help them out, but you know, there are other people along the street who have complained about, you know, this unruly gathering that's happened. And we feel like that this increased safety and enhancement zone will just increase likelihood of this happening without it being the fault of these homeowners. Yeah, forgive me for this being a little bit unprofessional. This is my first time doing this, but
You're doing fine.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that other than that, you guys have all the information you need from me, I guess. Yeah, I do really appreciate you guys helping. I'm not just trying to do this for, like, you know, obviously I want to have this party and stuff like that, but I appreciate you guys doing what you're doing, and yeah, have a good night.
Thank you so much.
Our final speaker is Stu Jenkins.
Good evening, I'm Stu Jenkins. I moved here when Cal Poly had 14,000 students. And actually 4,000 students, now that I think of it. The town was 14,000 people. And I was sure that Poly Royal was for my birthday. But anyway, I'm not going to repeat a lot of what was going on and what was said, but I think you need to think about the fact that you have so few officers on every night. And when one of these flash mobs occurs and brings 4,000 to 5,000 people into a neighborhood of residential dwellings, they can't protect themselves or the city or the residents, or let alone the young people who have a 2.5 blood alcohol. I support the request for a change in the ordinance, and I want to compliment council for figuring out the language to meet their needs, but keep it simple. When somebody is drinking heavily as they're preparing these parties, make it simple. Make the ordinance simple. Start the first day of March and end the 18th day of March for the enhancement zone. Then the young folks can follow that. Think about Hallow Weekend, it's going to become Hallow Week. Amend the ordinance so it starts the 15th of October and ends the 2nd of November for the enhancement zone. If it's simple, it can be followed. It's less easy to think, you know what, let's hold the party on Wednesday instead of on the weekend. So that's my suggestion. The other suggestion I have for you as you consider this is remember how few officers you have. Cal Poly is a great resource, and the kids and their parents contribute a great deal to this community. That doesn't give folks license to abuse this community. You should think about setting aside an additional $3 million, because that's what you're talking about for enforcement costs if things get out of hand, for Chief Scott to use to bring in officers from the Sheriff's Department and other agencies.
Thank you so much. I don't know that we have to go over mutual aid here, but I know that that's something that you do already utilize. Do you wish to share anything more about that?
Yes, Madam Mayor, and there are significant costs that we incur as a community, first in overtime, and then obviously while mutual aid doesn't necessarily have a cost, it certainly can, especially if a negative incident occurs. And while mutual aid is a great resource to the police department, our biggest concern is the officers, however well-trained they are, coming into our community are not aware of our policies and do not have our specific training and are not accustomed to interactions with our community. And so we take that very, very seriously. And so when we bring in other agencies to assist We just can't predict those outcomes, and that's not a position the department is comfortable with.
Thank you. And I know in the report you did share about how the Cal Poly Police Department also works closely with us. Did you want to share anything else about that?
Correct. Cal Poly works exceedingly close, especially on these days that we can predict that we're going to need their assistance. However, it's a very few amount of officers that work with Cal Poly, work for Cal Poly, and so while we do appreciate that assistance, it's generally only a handful of officers at best that can assist.
Great, thank you for sharing that. Any other questions, or shall we start deliberation? Oh, sorry, City Attorney Dietrich, did you want to add anything?
I just wanted to briefly address I'm, as you know, a big fan of keep it simple where you can, but I do also want to point the council's attention to the provisions related to the designation process that are required. So there's findings that and that speaks to Deputy Chief Michael's statements about following the data. So there really does need to be data of a threat to justify the imposition of the safety enhancement zone. And so unfortunately, it's not possible to just blanket block off time because it's more administratively simple. We have to have the data to support the times and geographic locations in which we're imposing the safety enhancement zone.
Thank you for highlighting that. And on top of it, we have incredibly intelligent students that come to this university. So, Councilmember Schwarzman.
Yes, Chief, you mentioned overtime costs around the safety enhancement zone, but I don't think that anybody asked or that you specifically said, what is the staffing during these safety enhancement zone times? I'm assuming, and I think you've said before, that you tend to upstaff or have officers on call in case, so it's not the regular staffing level that you would normally have on a Wednesday night as you would on a Wednesday if it was Halloween or during an enhancement safety zone, correct?
Thank you, Councilman Schwarzman. Correct. These are maximum deployment days, so that means all available officers that we can muster will deploy on that day. We typically don't release specific numbers that we have deployed for part of our safety plan. However, it is everybody that we can get to come to work and mandate to be there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pease.
Ready for deliberation if we're all there?
I have one quick question.
Okay, Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, one of our speakers brought up the issue of kind of determining fault in looking for unruly house penalties and who receives the fine. And when we have an event that turns into a massive block party, can you speak a little bit to how fault is then determined and those fines are then meted out?
Thank you, Councilmember Francis. So we, whenever we have an event like this, we monitor the event very closely, and so we build enough evidence to support who or which locations is facilitating the negative behaviors, and then we go in either at the time or immediately after the time to administer those citations. So typically, if we've singled out a location or a residence or a house, we have typically lots of surveillance activity, officer witnesses who can attest to the scale of the event that's happening at that property.
Thank you. Back to Councilmember Pease.
Thank you so much. And thank you to our speakers on this issue and to great staff work and providing data, so that's super helpful. I am supportive of moving forward with the recommendations as proposed. I was part of the council some years ago when the police department came and suggested similar changes around St. Patrick's Day, and there was a lot of activity from the student body asking not to, like, give us another chance. We're going to really take a lot of responsibility. And so City Council at the time, against staff recommendations, voted not to do the safety enhancement zone. And actually, I felt good about that. In that first year, it was pretty effective. And so I think there was a lot of leadership that came out of the students at that time, in Greek life in particular, and but some combination. And I think there's still opportunity for that. I think that, you know, this cycle could continue, and it probably doesn't feel great, and for, you know, other reasons cited. So I appreciate our leaders, ASI and Greek life, who are here listening to the concerns, and I hope that that they continue to have leadership and the collaborative problem solving. Like, it really concerns me to have the streets blocked. Is there a way that everyone can work together to stripe or cones, or, you know, if you know this thing is going to happen, you know, are there other ways? You know, why the thing needs to start at 4 a.m, you're not going to, you know, engender goodwill amongst your neighbors starting that early. Is there a way to, you know, start at 7 a.m? So, so anyway, I just think that proactively leadership from the student body would be really helpful in both addressing concerns of you know, being unnecessarily penalized and or genuine safety concerns that we all have. So. But I think we're where we are, and we should go forward with the current recommendation.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Marks.
Thank you. I'm no longer vice mayor. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Yeah, I think this is a good next step, and I hope that and I support it, and I hope that if it turns out that they move St. Patty's Day to the weekend after St. Patrick's Day, as opposed to the 2 weekends before St. Patrick's Day, that you will let council know immediately, because we're dealing with some extremely capable and intelligent and organized young people. I have a lot of admiration for Cal Poly students. In fact, I have a grandson who's in engineering in Cal Poly right now. But I do have to say that the experience of living on Albert Drive for over 30 years, over time it became more and more difficult for us to deal with it, especially during COVID, where we were trapped in the house and both of us working from home, and there was still a lot of noise and a lot of stuff happening in the streets at that time. The other factor over time that's changed is cell phones, so that people will, you know, how you can find a coffee shop near me, a party near me, you know, they have ways of knowing where the parties are and gravitating to it. So I think this proposed change in the ordinance is really important. And also, I think it gives some support to the people who are throwing parties, who I know for sure, I heard it many times, and sometimes from my neighbors. Well, I was having a party, I turned 21, and then all these people showed up, and I didn't know how to get rid of them. I couldn't make them go away. So I called the police on myself, you know. I said, please help me get rid of these people who are, you know, invading my home, you know. So at any rate, I feel it's something that San Luis Obispo is duty bound, I say morally bound, to continue to deal with. And I fully support it, and I know it's a hard aspect of the police job description here, in that we want to encourage the kind of leadership Councilmember Vice Mayor Pease was talking about, and students taking responsibility. And at the same time, I think it's really, I support what the city attorney was saying about making this somewhat surgical in terms of limiting the time, having it be database, so that it's not overreach in any way, so that we can continue to have that kind of mutual respect with the students that we need. So I'll make a motion when the time is right. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Shorsman.
Yes, thank you to the staff for providing this really detailed and well thought out report. I'm going to say that when I came onto council, I was actually pretty surprised that the safety enhancement zones were limited to the period that they were, and thought that it should be expanded, and see the value in that. And also thought that it would be much simpler, sort of as one of our speakers mentioned, you know, just a period of time before, but do appreciate and understand the data-driven perspective and the reasoning behind the complexity that it is. I do think it's going to be a little bit complicated and confusing, and so that will just involve some greater communication, and again, more communication and coordination as we have with Cal Poly and ASI and some of the other groups that will need to know this information, so that there's no confusion about when the zones are and when they aren't. But I know that we will be able to do that because we do have good collaborations already, and top-notch staff at all the facility, I mean, not all the facilities, all the institutions that are involved with this. So I think that's my biggest concern, is making sure that we communicate well on it and it's clear. And this is only one tool, as has been pointed out. This isn't the end-all, be-all solution to teaching people how to be good neighbors. It's going to be an ongoing thing that we'll need to look at, and I could possibly see some other amendments coming in the future based on the way things go forward. But I think we need to start somewhere, and this is a good place to start. So happy to support the motion when it's made.
Thank you. Councilmember Francis.
Thank you again to all the speakers, and thank you to Vice Mayor Pease for the historical context on both the thoughts of the previous councils and just giving us a little insight to when this has come up before, and also for your comments on leadership and compromise, which I think is going to be a really big part of all of this moving forward. As I said earlier, I'm concerned about chasing these events around the calendar and about potential confusion around the shifting dates, but I am really hopeful for leadership from student body and from Greek Life to help mitigate as well as collaborate so that we can really head a lot of this off. And also grateful to Cal Poly leadership in helping us navigate this and hopefully get ahead of it a little bit and keep our neighborhoods around Poly livable. I'm in favor of these changes, and really grateful to the data driving the decisions that we're making on expanded enforcement. So thank you all.
Well, thank you to my colleagues for your different comments, and I appreciate the hard work in putting this together and the involvement of the different stakeholder conversations. While I do think that it would be helpful to involve Cuesta, I completely understand what you're saying as far as kind of the people who are typically attending or organizing seem to come from Cal Poly, so it is what it is. I really do think that Thursday before St. Patrick's Day, if it's on a Friday through Sunday, probably is helpful, but I also hear the data-driven. If there's no data that supports that, then I hear that too, so thank you. I think that I would love to see people be accountable and have a great time at their own events, and then be able to not have to have this conversation at all. And yet, here we are. Unbeknownst to some of our public commenters, I used to live on Cerro Romaldo. I've lived on LOVR and Perfumo, where kind of the other section, I guess you could say, of a lot of typically student rental housing. And what I most appreciate about our resolution is that it covers the whole city, because realistically, people live all over the city, of whatever age or whatever educational background you are. So I think that's really something I really appreciate. The curiosity I have around the top houses, I would love to at some point sit with Christine Wallace and learn more. That's outside of a dais moment. And I do think there's something to be said about restorative justice. We've talked about restorative justice for a long time, but I think from 2020 till now, it's been a larger conversation, which is how do we help people realize the positive and negative aspects of their actions? And so I understand that The DA is out right now, and they'll be whenever he returns from his leave. But I do think that's something to think about as we talk about for Cal Poly and OSRR, and for us as the city, how do we connect and how do we make that happen? And I do agree also with my colleagues around the awareness and communication of the NUSES. I think it's going to be really important for us and Cal Poly, from Cal Poly staff to Cal Poly students, of how to help get this information out. I hope it does help eliminate the people that are coming to visit, as people used to in IV back in the Halloween days there. And I think there's, there've been some emails that came in around, this is not the only tool. It's been said again today. When we have our budget conversations, neighborhood wellness does not keep coming up high enough in the amount of people that talk about this is what we should spend our money on. But really, we haven't spent a great amount of money on neighborhood wellness for a long time, and well over 10 years. And I look at this and think, well, how are we going to pull people together in our different communities if we don't actually invest in our community neighborhoods? So it's something to think about a little bit more. I think this is a future conversation, not necessarily a SES conversation, but I think it's part of the toolbox is how do we do this? So just kind of my 2 cents. And I am happy to support this resolution. So Councilmember Marks.
Thank you. And again, thank you for all your hard work, all the outreach, and I'm hopeful that this does make a dent in the problem. So with that, I'd like to move the staff recommendation on item, here we go, item 6A, introduction of an ordinance amending Municipal Code Section 9.22.040, safety enhancement zones. And thank you very much.
Thank you. And Councilmember Shorsman?
I will second.
Thank you. City Clerk, can you have roll call?
Councilmember Marks?
Yes.
Councilmember Shorsman?
Yes.
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Pease?
Yes.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you so much for all of your time and your hard work. Okay, so next up, we'll have item 6B, which is our 2023 state legislative briefing, and that is from Deputy City Manager Greg Herman and Policy and Project Manager Natalie Harnett.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Happy to be here tonight. We're going to give you a brief recap on this past year's state legislative session, and also really kick off our work on legislative advocacy for the following year. So we have 2 different recommendations for this evening. The first item is just to receive and file the report of adopted laws from the 22-23 session from the state legislature. And the second recommendation is to consider the ad hoc appointment of a council committee to participate in the review and update of the city's legislative platform as we prepare for the next legislative session. And we'll speak a little bit more about the approach should the council want to take it for that item. I'm happy to provide just a little bit of background very quickly about the city's legislative program. So that's housed in the administration and IT department within the city manager's office and is managed by Natalie, our policy and project manager. And really it's a way for us to be able to advocate for the city's interests primarily at the state level as it relates to pending legislation. We rely heavily on Cal Cities for this work effort, and oftentimes we're responding to requests from them to either support or oppose pending legislation. And the main tool that we use, and it isn't the subject of tonight's item, is our legislative platform that'll be coming back to you this spring. And that's effectively a set of pre-approved policy statements from the council that allow us to respond quickly when those requests come in, and that's often the case, just given the speed with which Sacramento tends to work at times. So with a little bit more on kind of an overview of the state and also some of the bills and potential implications for the city, I'm happy to hand it over to Natalie.
Thank you, Greg. So to get us started, during the 22-23 regular session of the California State Legislature, legislators and committees proposed a total of 2,600 bills. That's the most in a decade. About 1,000 of them made it to Governor Newsom's desk, and by October 13th, Newsom completed his work and 890 were signed and 156 were vetoed. That's about 100 fewer bills than were signed compared to 2022. Most of the bills will go into or went into effect January 1st, 2024. However, some of the urgency measures adopted went into effect immediately, and then there's also some that won't go into effect until future years. Starting us off, as you've probably heard by now, the state expects an approximate $68 billion deficit in fiscal year 24. After 2 years of unprecedented and somewhat unexpected revenue growth, California faced a downturn in revenues by just the declining stock market, high inflation, rising interest rates, and some job losses in high wage sectors. Keep in mind that unlike the city, the state's main source of revenue is income tax. So when individuals make less on their investments, then the income tax takes the hit. While addressing a deficit of this scope will be challenging, the legislature has a number of options to do so. They're proposing options to reduce spending on schools and community colleges that could address approximately $17 billion of the budget problem. Further adjustments in areas of the budget, such as reductions in one-time spending, could address an additional $10 billion. And then to note, there's about $24 billion in reserves that could be used to help address the problem as well. These options and some others like cost shifts would allow the legislature to solve most of the deficit without impacting the ongoing core service level. That being said, addressing the deficits in the longer term will be difficult. Despite the deficit, the budget maintains most of the major investments into programs in education, healthcare, climate, public safety, and social service programs. Some of the highlights include over $8 billion for behavioral health care, $1 billion in funding for the Homeless Housing Assistance and Prevention Grant Program, $5.1 billion for public transit, $401 million in one-time funding for flood management and response activities. Some of the reductions include $67.5 million reduction for the Department of Housing and Community Development, and a delay of approximately $340 million that was previously allocated to the department's foreclosure intervention program. Additionally, there was a lowering of $8.7 billion in funding for climate resources and environmental programs across the budget window of 21-22 through 23-24. So we'll go through each of the categories, and I'll just highlight some of the major ones. The first one is community services, behavioral health, and homelessness. As a reminder to council and to the public, these are services that are run by the county, and the county receives most of the funding for these programs. Therefore, they will largely be the ones to see the impacts from the new laws, but since homelessness is one of our major city goals, it's important for us to be aware of them. Although the state budget does not include any new ongoing funding for homelessness, it does include a $1 billion investment into the Homeless Housing Assistance and Prevention Grant Program mentioned earlier. AB 129 will require that in order to access these funds, counties will have to establish a regionally coordinated homeless action plan. This is something that our county is already working on. SB 326 expands the Mental Health Services Act to include treatment for individuals suffering from substance abuse. It also prioritizes investments into housing interventions for people experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness. AB 531 authorizes over $6 million in bonds to construct, acquire, and rehabilitate community-based residential care facilities. or care settings, and 1.5 of this is in a pot specific for local governments. While this is good news, it's too soon to say what the trade-offs might be in terms of the impact to our region and to county services. SB 43 expands the California's 1967 conservatorship law to ensure that individuals experiencing severe substance abuse or co-occurring disorders receive the care that they need. While these investments are welcomed, they are largely one-time, and they do not sufficiently fund the long-term plans for the cities. The city will continue to seek out all available funding and will advocate for funding for the county and for the best use of the regional services and the social services entities. Next is environmental quality. So California continues to lead the way in an effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and promote sustainability. The legislature passed a few notable laws that will impact the city, but in most cases, they already align with our own climate action goals. AB 1526 makes some minor but important clarifying changes to a previous bill, which established a program for the collection, management, and recycling of single-use plastics. These clarifications will go a long way to ensuring that SB 54, the previous program, can be implemented effectively and equitably, which will subsequently help ensure that the city gets its share of revenue. AB 1572 is in response to the state's continued effort to reduce water usage from 2025 onward. It will prohibit the use of potable water to irrigate non-functional turf on commercial, municipal, and institutional or multifamily residential properties by the year 2027. This is a bill that we were expecting, and we've already been working to ensure that we will be compliant. Lastly, in response to the recent storms, AB 30 requires that the Department of Water Resources research, develop, and implement forecasting models to improve its predictions of atmospheric rivers and their impact on water supply, flooding, post-wildfire debris flow, and environmental conditions. There's no action required from the city on this item, but it may impact our future modeling for our own water supply availability. Next is the governance, transparency, and housing, community, and economic development. During the 2023 legislative cycle, the governor signed into law 80 bills that pertain to housing, community, and economic development. Many of these will impact the city's development review process or regulations to some degree, but in most cases, it's pretty minimal. Staff has identified 24 bills that pertain to programs, policies, or procedures that are relevant to the city, and those are listed in the report. And then a couple to highlight here include AB 1332, which requires every local agency to establish a program for pre-approval of accessory dwelling units by January 1st, 2025. The program mandates that local agencies accept plan submissions for pre-approval, and they must base their approval or denial on those established standards. AB 1114 establishes specific time limits for review and approval process of post-entitlement phase permits, such as building and public improvement permits. It also provides procedures for notifying applicants of incompleteness and non-compliance. This bill won't really impact the city other than requiring us to provide some additional information on our website. AB 1490 makes 100% affordable housing projects that adaptively reuse existing residential buildings in allowable use, regardless of any inconsistencies between the project and our local plan, zoning, or regulations. It also limits local governments from imposing maximum density or floor area ratio requirements. SB 684 streamlines the approval processes for housing development projects of 10 or fewer residential units on urban lots under 5 acres. It mandates local agencies to consider these projects through a ministerial approval process, which eliminates discretionary reviews. AB 543 mandates that local government agencies must, 548 mandates that local enforcement agencies must establish policies and procedures for inspecting multi-unit buildings if an inspector or code enforcement officer finds that a unit is substandard or in violation of the state housing law. Moving to governance, transparency, and labor relations, the governor acted on several labor relations bills. The most significant is AB 1484. This bill will require that temporary employees who have been hired to perform the same or similar type of work as permanent employees will have to be represented by the employee organization in the same bargaining unit as the permanent employees upon request of the union. This will likely have some unanticipated consequences and raise the costs for the city of San Luis Obispo. However, because it is new, it's hard to say how significant that impact will be. SB 616 is another labor relations measure signed that very minorly impacts city operations as it increases the amount of paid sick leave days currently afforded to temporary employees from 3 to 5 days per year. The city's Human Resources Department has already made changes to ensure that the city is compliant with the current law, which went into effect on January 1st. AB 577 is a Brown Act related bill, and it doesn't change much, but it eliminates the sunset of the bill that passed during COVID, which will allow cities to meet remotely during states of emergency under the modified Brown Act requirements. This is good news and will give the city some added flexibility. On the public safety side, one of the big focuses in 2023 was curbing illegal drug use and specifically addressing fentanyl addiction and overdoses. The state budget includes $93 million in opioid settlement funds over the next 4 years. AB 33 and SB 19 established a multi-sector task force to address fentanyl addiction and overdoses. And then AB 1166 is designed to make the opioid antagonistics more available. AB 1448 is aimed to incentivize cities to take enforcement action against illicit cannabis operations by providing a 50-50 split of any of the penalties recovered, which previously it would not receive. AB 40 is aimed to address the issue of lengthy ambulance offload times and will now require local emergency medical service agencies to develop a standard to meet ambulance offload time of 30 minutes 90% of the time by July 2024. This will be incorporated in the next EMS contract. And SB 14, lastly, although it doesn't directly impact the city, was a highly publicized bill that passed, which edits existing law to include human trafficking of a minor within the definition of a serious penalty or a serious felony for all purposes, including the purposes of the 3 strikes law. This will strengthen protections for thousands of victims. There were no major revenue or taxation bills passed in 2023 that'll noticeably impact the city. Just a couple of sales tax related ones. AB 28 is an excise tax for sales of guns and ammunitions, and then AB 1203 provides sales tax exemption for breast pumps and other related supplies. And then, although not part of the 2023 legislative session, but of course the Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act will continue to stay top of mind as we move towards the 2024 ballot. In terms of transportation, communications, and public works, cities won some major financing wins with the signatures of SB 706, AB 400, and AB 334. which will ultimately make it easier for cities to fund and complete infrastructure projects. These processes allow earlier and greater collaboration between stakeholders and give contractors greater flexibility, saving cities time and money on critical projects. SB 706 and AB 400 will expand the use of design build and progressive design build delivery methods for local public works projects. These processes allow earlier and greater collaboration between stakeholders and give contracts greater flexibility. We did send out a staff correspondence where our public works staff provided a bit more context on these, but under the city's current charter, it does not explicitly allow design build project delivery. However, staff plan to bring a study session to council around fall of 2024 to determine if a work item should be included in the next financial plan or future financial plan. AB 334 will allow cities to accept bids from independent contractors for subsequent phases of public contracts, depending on the scope of their work for the prior phase. State's law current language, which is unclear, limits the pool of qualified design professionals that cities can accept bids from. This was one that Cal Cities was involved in providing input on the bill's final language. And then, although not part of this legislation, but previously approved amendments to the diesel-fueled fleet regulations took effect on January 1st. So this rule will impact the city's fleet purchases. Between 2024 and 2026, half of medium to heavy duty vehicles that we require will need to be zero emission vehicles. The city is already in the process of doing this, and many of our new fleet are, in fact, zero emissions. On the communications front, there are two notable bills that will impact the city. AB 965 will require cities to undertake a batch permitting process upon receiving 2 or more broadband project sites that are submitted at the same time by the same applicant. Staff are still working to understand how this bill could impact workflows, but ultimately it could put some pressure on resources to approve applications within a more restricted timeframe. Lastly is AB 1637. This bill does not go into effect until 2029, but it will require the city to change its domain from a .org to a .gov. This ultimately ripples into a much larger project that includes changing our branding, public communications, and various forms. Fortunately, our IT staff is already on top of this, and they've have some pieces in place already, and will continue to prepare for that transition. So, in preparation for the 2024 legislative session, Cal Cities has released their priorities, which happen to be very similar to the city's own major city goals. The details of the priorities are included in attachment C, but in summary, the 4 of them are safeguarding local revenues and bolstering local economic development, strengthen climate change resiliency and disaster preparedness, improve public safety in California communities, expanding investments to prevent and reduce homelessness, and increase the supply of affordable housing. So these priorities will be considered as we move forward with our own legislative platform update. As Greg mentioned, this is something we do on an annual basis, and this slide kind of just shows the next steps into updating that. So we'll take a look at our existing platform to determine what has changed and if there's any emergent priorities or language changes that need to be made, we can do that. And then as one of the recommendations on this item, we're asking council to either appoint an ad hoc subcommittee to work on this effort or direct staff to make changes, and then we'll come back to the council as a whole to review those changes. Once finalized, the council will adopt the new platform in March, which will help us guide our legislative advocacy program through the rest of the session. And with that, I'll bring back the recommendations. So the first part of this item is a receive and file, and then the second part is to consider appointing an ad hoc committee.
Thank you so much. That's a lot to go through and a lot to summarize, so we really appreciate it. I had lots of questions, but really it's for the state to say what's happening with this next. For example, I thought, with the water, can we now then offer an incentive versus with the 218, we haven't really been able to. It's been exactly what it costs to make is what we have to charge as far as the rates. So just trying to think about if we're trying to help people not use water as much, it would be great to have an incentive opportunity. But again, that's up to the state and figuring out how that works next. So anyway, there's a lot of questions still, it seems like, including the PUF and the psychiatric healthcare facility, and what this looks like for conservatorship locally. There's so many questions that I look forward to having answers to in the future. Councilmember Marks.
Yeah, thank you for all this hard work. I'm glad you're doing it and not me. It's great. So, but I had a question about 1572, AB 5072, same thing, restricting potable water use on non-essential lawns and such. So in our city, we have recycled water. So you can still, there's no restriction on the use of potable water for non-essential lawn, for recycled water for non-essential lawns, right? The only restriction is using potable water. So our recycled water, that's no problem. Okay, but to me, our problem is that it only goes so far in the city. And so I've been an advocate for a long time to try to bring the recycled water capacity to the northern part of the city. So I just wanted to raise that. I think this restriction might actually present an opportunity to reconsider whether we want to expand northerly our recycled water capacity. So good, thanks for clarifying that.
Thank you, Councilmember Shorsman.
Thank you for the thorough report and the answers to some of my questions and more clarification that you put out in the agenda correspondence about some of the language in the bills can be super wonky. And so I appreciate you taking the time to kind of simplify it for those who decide to delve into the agenda correspondence and learn a little bit more. This is a full house here tonight, but this is actually a really important subject. And so hopefully others will go later and read all the important information that you put out for us. There's just one bill that I actually talked to the city manager about earlier today, and so I wanted to bring it up as something to definitely keep on our radar and see if there's going to be any impacts for us, is Assembly Bill 1909, which gives cyclists a head start on crossing intersections at a crosswalk with pedestrians. And as I mentioned, talked to the city manager briefly about this, but just wanting to know if there's anything that we're going to need to do to come into compliance with that, and also if we can kind of add that into our sort of communication and education efforts in some way.
City Manager, would you like to chime in?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Councilman Shorsman, for the question in advance. And so I did have a chance during agenda review, and Councilmember Marks had the benefit of hearing some of the conversation, but a lot of the work has already been done, and our transportation group has modified the signals. I think a lot of it is outreach, and I had some initial conversations with Chief Scott in terms of making sure our officers understand, and particularly the public writ large understands that this law has essentially, provided the same privileges that pedestrians have, and so there isn't any frustration on the roadways when we see cyclists start to take advantage of the pedestrian signal and get into the intersection earlier than many have experienced in the past. So there may be some intersections we're going to have to modify, but for the most part, our team's done a good job getting out there and modifying the signals. If there's any areas, there's always, you can use that slow, and we can get to those intersections if they have the technology. But I think the other side is going to be with Chief Scott and make sure our officers understand and that motorists understand the new allowances under the law.
I think that's a really great place for us as council members to try and, with our social media presences, et cetera, help people as much as we can to understand, because I can see that creating a lot of angst and frustration on the part of drivers when they're used to a bicyclist having the same go time, so to speak, as a driver would, and would want to try to minimize that. Thank you.
Good point. Thank you. Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, I actually just had a process and procedure question for you. Since we're deciding tonight on ad hoc committees, there's obviously a ton here that's really meaty and I want to dive into it. But is the opportunity for us to really discuss all of that after we decide if we're going to have an ad hoc committee, or do we want to get into some of that this evening?
Yeah, I think on average, we do have an ad hoc committee because of all these new bills that we want to make sure that our local legislative platform is matching the appropriate goals for us, but also matching the newer bills that are in process. So I think, or have gone through. So I think it's important that we do have that ad hoc committee. That's just my
Agreed.
own
I very
personal
much
thought.
want to see an ad hoc committee, but I guess my question was more along the lines of, do we get to get into the meat and potatoes tonight and discussing what we want to see on there, or is that going to be a discussion that comes up after our ad hoc committee meets and decides on the new language?
That's a good question. I think to me, it would be that we would decide who's going to be on the ad hoc committee, and then the ad hoc committee would discuss what they would suggest and then bring it back to the council. And then from there, we have the fun conversations.
Awesome. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
that.
thank you.
I am in
I had to like
favor
remind
of
myself.
forming an ad hoc committee then.
Wonderful. Councilmember Marks.
Yes, I just want to say that's how we've done it in the past, is kind of, heard the presentation, then appointed the ad hoc committee, and then, that presentation is made, and then there is more input, and then the five of us vote. So, yeah.
Yeah, I believe all of us but you have been on a ad hoc committee, so not to offer you.
Last year.
Oh, you were? Okay.
To do it again. But I just couldn't remember when we actually discussed.
Okay, perfect, yeah. I just want to make sure to offer that opportunity if you hadn't had it yet.
I will jump at it in a second.
Councilmember Shoresman.
I think the other alternative is, that was listed in the staff report here and the slides, was that if we chose, not to say that this is how we're going, but if we chose not to do an ad hoc committee, we could delegate staff to make the suggested or make the recommendations that they have for what should change in the legislative platform, and then just bring it back to us, and then we could have the messier conversation maybe without an ad hoc committee. That's the way I'm understanding.
You're right, we could do that too. So at this point, without any further questions, we'll bring to public comment. Any public comment, City Clerk?
Yes, we have two. The first one will be Donna Hare Price, and then after that will be Barry Price.
Great, thank you.
Council and staff, I'd like to make some suggestion or revisions to our ledge platform to be brought back in the spring that reflects proposed legislation in the 2024 statewide package and reflects our needs. In the homeless resource advocacy section, I'd like to see added support an evidence-based, data-driven, multi-pronged eviction protection strategy. We know eviction protections keep people housed. Next, I'd like to see added to the community development section, support for legislation that removes the ban on rent control in California, giving local communities the right to stabilize rent and make apartments more affordable to low-income and middle-income renters. Also, please add support for policies to expand programs and policies for tenant affordability and stability. please continue the ad hoc committee, and I highly suggest you include community members that find the legislative platform exciting. And you're welcome. I'm welcome to put in an application for said committee. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good evening, Mayor Stewart, council, staff. Happy New Year to everyone. It's nice to see you here. Let's all hope that 2024 leaves the world a better place than it's found it. I also support the ad hoc committee approach that includes council representation. And I would also like to suggest if there's a way to engage the public in those discussions, especially those of us who are legislation geeks and actually find this stuff interesting, because that will help with community engagement and also help with accountability. As you know, there are several legislative opportunities that can concretely help stem the accelerating rate of evictions that we're seeing and put the brakes on skyrocketing rental costs in the city. And I'd like to suggest additions to our legislative platform that can help to address some of these issues. These would be in the homeless resource advocacy section, in the DEI section, and also in the community development section. I do want to emphasize support for legislation that removes state-level barriers to local control in California and gives communities like ours the ability to keep homes affordable for low and middle income renters, and also gives us the ability to build the infrastructure that we need to support that development. That would be in the community development section, in the DEI section. Because evictions disproportionately impact mothers and children, and especially women of color and non-English speakers, I would like to see us add in the DEI section support for legislation and funding to expand eviction protection and prevention programs that disproportionately impact BIPOC, LGBTQIA, and other marginalized communities. And finally, in the homeless resource advocacy section, please support an evidence-based, data-driven, and multi-purpose eviction protection strategy so we can keep people housed who otherwise might end up living in their cars or on the streets. And we all know how much trouble we've been having finding, providing help to folks like that. So thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to consult further and provide some specific language if that's something you'd be interested in.
Thank you so much. Anyone else online or in person?
No, that was our final speaker.
Great, thank you so much. I do have one more question I forgot to ask earlier. AB 1490 reminded me about where is it? Is it locally or is it statewide that we are not allowed to put housing in the first floor of downtown? Is that our local ordinances or zoning, or is that our statewide requirement? Okay, Derek.
Madam Mayor, if I could ask Director Tway to come forward, she'd talk a little bit about 1490 and the local restrictions and our zoning ordinance for downtown residential.
Perfect, thank you.
This is a long walk for a short answer. That is a local restriction, so we could change that if the council wanted at any point.
Great, thank you. Okay, Councilmember Shoresman.
Yeah, just a question, I guess, for city manager, maybe city attorney about, in my tenure on council, we've had ad hoc committees of the council two members of the council coming together to talk about whatever it is, legislative platform. And we have advisory bodies where we have members of the community that sit on advisory bodies to help us make decisions, weigh in on different things. But is there a precedence for having, as was proposed in our public comment, a committee that's a couple of council members and some community members that work on something together? Just curious if that's something that can happen or should happen, or if there's any reasons around that.
Well, I think there's a couple things, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Shortson, for you to consider. As one, as you appoint public members, it becomes a Brown Hat Committee. And so then the work itself, the meetings become subject to, public notice meetings, and then there'll be an expectation for agendas. So there's just a different level of staff support, et cetera. And so the question is, how do you want to elevate this? And then the other question would be is, if you're going to have a public members, what's the process by which for you to appoint members, and the application process by which to consider applications and then make that formal appointment at a city council meeting. So I would suggest, good idea maybe for you to evaluate as a council. Is this something you want to evaluate for future years, since we'd be eager to bring back a legislative platform for you in the spring, so it's effective for the next legislative session. And maybe that's an item that the ad hoc committee of just the council members can report back on to the full council about whether or not we should extend it, and is there any other changes to how we ultimately develop for council adoption.
Thank you, appreciate that context.
Yeah, thank you. And I think there's always an opportunity to have like a listening session around the entire platform that was just brought to us, as far as kind of the updates, and just do something locally as an individual council member, kind of like the coffee chats you did, Vice Mayor. I think that's a great plan for the community to be involved. So I encourage any community member to invite any of us to talk about anything that is interesting you or exciting you or challenging to you due to what's happening at the SLO City. Vice Mayor Pease.
Thanks. I only have a couple of comments. And the one that I just wanted to make sure that we all notice on the Cal Cities goals, it's, and I have brought this up as being on one of the Cal Cities, the Environmental Policy Committee, is that policy, one of their 4 focus areas is climate change resilience, and not climate action. And so I think we need to make sure that we're thoughtful about the limitations of what Cal Cities, in their effort to please 482 cities across the state of California, is that their language is, they tiptoe around it. I think in practice that they support a lot of measures that would result in climate action, but I just want to make sure that we're cautious about relying too heavily on the Cal Cities as a platform in and of itself. I support an ad hoc committee. I support members of the community providing information to the ad hoc. I don't think that, that I would want to elevate our state advocacy to take up more staff time, energy, et cetera. So I think having an ad hoc makes sense. I'm willing to serve, but if there are folks who are enthusiastic and would like to do that, then that sounds like a better match. And I think if any of us, obviously, when that ad hoc is appointed, either if we have comments here or just to send our own thoughts like, hey, take a look at this, to that ad hoc committee ahead of it coming before council, I think that's appropriate as well.
Thank you very much. Vice Mayor Marks. Sorry.
Thank you. Yes, I support having an ad hoc committee as well. And I think one of the things that a member of an ad hoc committee could do would be to reach out to the public. And if I were on that committee, I would want to get those lists that the 2 of our speakers had tonight and say, oh, well, look at that, look at this, let's look at that. So, I mean, part of what council members do besides taking public comment is public outreach. So I think it's sufficient. I don't feel like we would need to make another separate committee but we need to be diligent and forthright and energetic in terms of getting the information we think we need to put together a legislative platform that really reflects the values of our community.
Well said. Councilmember Shorsman.
Yeah, there's just one thing that I wanted to point out that was prominently in the staff report and some of the materials, but I just am really pleased to see that in all of the different changes that were made in the budget, that there was a $1 billion still additional put towards the Homeless Housing Assistance and Prevention Grant Program, which is pretty big chunk of money that we receive in the county and that counties receive for designating towards affordable housing and homeless services. And so hopefully that will increase our proportion by some small proportion of that $1 billion coming towards our county to work towards those efforts as well. And just wanted to call that out in particular. I am in support of the ad hoc committee. I sat on the ad hoc committee 2 years ago with Councilmember Marks, and then I think it was the two of you, Vice Mayor Pease and Councilmember Francis the following year. So I appreciate the suggestions that we received from the community and would be also happy to hear other suggestions from others. I'm happy to serve on the committee, but knowing that I just did it 2 years ago too, I wouldn't want to take it away from especially Mayor, who hasn't in a couple of years, if she had energy around that. So happy to draw straws or however we want to do it.
Thank you. Yes, last time I was on it was with Councilmember Christensen, so it was a bit now. Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, I'm happy to take turns. I think we're pretty good at that up here. Since I was on it last time, I am enthusiastic about it and willing to do it again if we don't have other folks jumping up. But I'm really excited to move forward with having another one.
Great, thank you. And I think the other thing I wanted to mention early on, I can't find the exact page now, but there was also money around mental health. And I know there's been some challenges around the conversations of the state and money being taken away from behavioral health, but yet at the same time, I'm seeing money being put into homeless services with wraparound services, with housing with wraparound services. So I think there might be some creativity we have to have in our legislative platform so that we are welcoming monies, even if it doesn't seem like it's going in the exact right direction, as long as we are make sure the end result is what we're looking for. So kind of back to the climate resilience versus climate action, as long as our local result is what we're looking for, it may look a little different beyond. So I am happy to be on the ad hoc since I haven't been on for a while. I was actually, I love your enthusiasm and love that. I also was kind of thinking, Andy, Vice Mayor, since this might be your last time that you might be on it with me, was my thought. But if you don't have the time, I understand that too.
Yeah, I'd be happy, since I did do it recently, I'd be happy to let Councilmember Francis
okay, great.
Serve on that with you.
I also heard energy from Councilmember Shorsman, who hasn't done it for 2 years. So.
Should we flip a coin?
I know, right?
Look, we can take turns. It's your turn.
All right, so I hear Councilmember Shorsman and myself for the ad hoc committee as we put together that motion. So, all right, Councilmember Francis.
Oh, that was it.
Okay, so I'll just go ahead and put together the motion to accept the receive and file and to set up an ad hoc committee with myself and Councilmember Shorsman. And Councilmember Shorsman.
And I'm on a roll tonight with the second, so I'll second it.
Perfect, thank you so much. And City Clerk, can we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Stewart?
Yes.
Councilmember Shorsman?
Yes.
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Councilmember Marks? Yes. Vice Mayor Pease.
Yes.
And the motion passes 5-0. Thank you again for compiling and putting all of this together. We greatly appreciate it. And on that, we'll move forward to the last part of our meeting, which is the liaison reports and communications. I will make mine quick since I literally only have 2 things at this point. Since we did not have the last few weeks due to everyone's breaks, I went to the ribbon cutting, as I think most of my colleagues, all of my colleagues did today, for San Luis Drive. And again, just such an amazing amount of work from Public Works and all of the people in, all of the staff that worked on this, as well as our partners in the community and in construction and more. And then yesterday, I attended a Zoom lunch with the League of Women Voters. They hosted a housing Zoom, and I really encourage, if you didn't get to go to that, they usually have these recordings on their website. Check it out. It was really a good one, so I just wanted to highlight that. And lastly, point-in-time count volunteers are still needed to help count for the individuals who are experiencing homelessness in our county. Why this is so important is for decades now, this is how we get funding from the federal government into our community for homelessness. So I just really encourage, if you have any free time, to do some counting along with us all. There's training that happens now, and we'll be ready for January 23rd. So I'll move forward to Vice Mayor Pease.
Thank you so much. The couple of items that just before the holiday break on December 14th, Councilmember Francis and I were fortunate enough to be able to meet with the Deputy Consul General of China from the consulate. Came up. Shi Yang-king, maybe not saying that quite correctly, but they were wonderful. He and another colleague came up, and we just had a great conversation and showed him around a little, and he liked it here. And so, yeah, so it was great to set up that relationship. And then Cal City's policy committees are up and running. So I'm on the environmental quality committee, and so we had the orientation last week by Zoom. Great, super interesting group of folks who are on that, and so looking forward to those couple of meetings. And then just this morning was Downtown Slow, so it was great to be able to thank Adrienne Harris for her time as interim director, and then welcome LeBren Harris as she starts on Tuesday next week. So good things happening over there, and a great holiday season. So yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to attend the apprenticeship forum over at the pipe fitters, and there was an amazing turnout from a ton of students, local students, and then also state labor leaders. So it was really exciting to see both the organization behind that growing, and also enthusiasm from our local schools and student body. So it was great. Also got to go to ribbon cutting at People Self-Help for their LEEDS certification. And Vice Mayor Pease was there presenting and giving tours, which was really fantastic. So, and then of course, all of the other ribbon cuttings that were mentioned. It's been an exciting month.
Awesome, thank you. Councilmember Shoresman.
Yes, it's been a while, so I'll just hit the highlights. Several of them have been things that you all have been at also. I was also at the LEED certification for People's Self-Help Housing, and just a really impressive building, and just really cool to see that. And a big celebration with the unveiling on the wall, and Vice Mayor Pease helping pull the curtain back on the very impressive plaque on the wall. Really cool to see. The ribbon cutting today, just want to thank staff. They're all gone, but unveiling San Luis Creek, it just looks amazing and is just going to fare us so much better into the future. You can just tell it just looks so solid, and I'm really glad that we really seem to have done that right, and for the long haul. Also attended the Cal Cities Policy Committee orientation, as I'm on the Community Services Committee. Thank you for that appointment. And
also attended the, excuse me, the Zone 9 meeting before the holidays and the Palestinian Festival at the Trinity Hall, which was a really great event. Just some great food and presentations and panels and great just social gathering.
Great, thank you. Vice Mayor Pease, did you need to?
I did miss one, which was that on Sunday was the lamentation event for the war, the Israel-Gaza war, and it was organized by an interfaith coalition. So folks from Islamic, Jewish, Christian, multi-denominational, and they invited Mayor Stewart to speak, who had a conflict, so I was able to go there as a vice mayor and make some remarks and welcome them. And I read the vision statement from our Office of DEI as part of our kind of being a place of belonging here. So,
thank you for attending. I really appreciate that. Councilmember Marks.
Thank you. Well, I got a text during this meeting from Peter Cron at the Executive Director of the Integrated Waste Management Authority that all 7 cities have approved the joinder agreement. So February 1st, the county will rejoin the Integrated Waste Management Authority. So that was a nice outcome. I'd like to also say that I attended the creek restoration, Perfumo Creek restoration on December 9th and 16th. That is 3 Cal Poly students who were part of the College Corps got a grant from the Conservation District and also a grant from Creeklands Restoration nonprofit to help restore the segment of Perfumo Creek that runs it back of City Farm. And so 1,500 little trees and plants were planted. And it's now there's actually also a bike and pedestrian path. This is the part of the land that's on the bank of the creek, but beyond the part that's being cultivated. So it's really beautiful. It's all cleaned out. The sheep have been eating the ivy, and so that was good. And also I wanted to just give you a little update on Central Coast Community Energy. The city of San Luis Obispo has benefited from the provision of the REACH Code program, which is no-cost technical assistance to help local cities and counties adopt and implement REACH codes. And so there was a grant from 3CE, which we benefited from. And the other thing is that the Electrify Your Ride program, which is now it's the 4th year that it's been offered by Central Coast Community Energy. This emphasis right now is to provide rebates for 3CE customers who purchase or lease an electric vehicle, and also has rebates for level 2 chargers, EV chargers, as well as home electrical upgrades like panels and wiring and batteries. And of the funds that were distributed, San Luis Obispo County residents got the highest percentage, was 28% of the $700,000 that 3CE had to offer. So I won't go any further right now, but 3CE is chugging along, doing well. So that's all I have for now.
That's great news. Thank you so much. Well, thank you everyone for a great meeting, and really excited to take a little time for Martin Luther King next week, and there's some great events. I hope that you all will attend. We'll be attending the Monday NAACP event. And then on Thursday, there's also another event, but we also have the Student Community Liaison Commission or Committee and the Slow Climate Coalition kickoff. So a lot of things happening at once, but that's just how it always is, because this is an awesome, very involved, very active community, and that's what we do. So have a wonderful week, and we'll see you on the 23rd back here.